Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 558. The Battle at San Lorenzo. The guild elites crammed onto the narrow stone wall quickly realized they couldn't surround Ethan. There wasn't enough space up here, not with dozens of bodies crowding the rampart. At the front, two barbarian shield tanks charged at him with their massive shields raised. Charge! Ethan's deep voice rumbled with scorn. Let me show you what a real charge looks like. He crouched and launched himself forward, the ground shuddering beneath his colossal frame. Dust exploded upward in a choking cloud as he rocketed across the wall and smashed straight into the shield tanks. His enormous arms swung out, fists clenched like hammers. Heavy strike! He roared. The blow landed with a pair of bone-rattling cracks. Both shield tanks were lifted off their feet and hurled backward, flailing helplessly through the air like broken kites before slamming into the player's mast behind them. Ethan's eyes narrowed. By all rights, that strike should have thrown them completely off the wall and into the streets below. No matter. Their defenses were broken, and the fragile targets behind them lay exposed. Cleaving tempest. His voice was calm, almost casual as he swung. The arc of his attack carved through the crowded line, and 6 players crumpled in an instant. For the first time since landing on the wall, Ethan spoke again, his words sharp with disdain. Is that all? Ding. System notification. San Lorenzo town is under attack by hostile faction players. Carnage faction members. Provide immediate support. Successful defense will reward 500 honor points. The notification echoed across the battlefield and into every Carnage faction player's interface. A moment of silence followed, then an eruption of excitement. After Ethan had activated the honor system, all players had access to it. And every one of them had been salivating over the rewards. The Carnage faction in particular lived for PvP. They'd been fixated on honor gear ever since the system appeared, especially the resilience stat, which reduced incoming player damage. But until now, they hadn't been able to earn any points. If not for that restriction, Carnage players would have been slaughtering hostile guilds non-stop. The cheapest set available cost 500 honor points per piece, each piece providing 30 points of resilience. Stat-wise, honor gear was roughly equivalent to silver-tier equipment, but resilience changed everything. Higher-tier honor sets offered more resilience, though the other stats didn't scale as steeply. Even the Pinnacle Warlord set, available only to Carnage faction, was equivalent to gold-tier equipment in raw numbers, but with fixed affixes that increased accuracy, boosted crit rate, and shaved off incoming damage. PvE gear might offer more variety, but honor gear had its own brutal edge. Of course, gold-tier gear was already priced out of reach for most players. Even silver gear was usually locked away in guild vaults, traded only for contribution points, and reclaimed if the player ever left. Most ordinary players had to make do with bronze, or sell anything better to their guilds for the sake of survival. That was why Ethan's steady stream of silver, gold, and even dark gold drops had drawn so much attention. He'd been hunting over-leveled monsters, and first kills almost always dropped rare loot. But after the first kill, the odds plummeted, making every high tier drop an object of frenzy. Which explained why, the moment the system announcement went out, Carnage players were already sprinting toward teleportation arrays. They were hungry. They didn't even stop to consider what resilience truly meant. Ethan knew. A player with no resilience stood no chance against someone with even a single point. Their attacks would be reduced by up to 80%, creating an unbridgeable gulf between having and not having. Against opponents without resilience, even 1 point was enough to render you nearly invincible. But when 2 players both had resilience, only large differences began to matter. Another notification appeared before Ethan's eyes. Ding. System notification. Special quest triggered. Objective, conquer San Lorenzo town. Kill the town mayor. Reward, 50,000 honor points. Honor title upgraded by 1 level. His heart pounded. 50,000 honor points, for perspective, that was equivalent to 50,000 player kills. The honor title upgrade was even rarer. Titles required not just kills but maintenance. Higher ranks decayed every day if you failed to fight, and dying could demote you instantly. Keeping a title stable meant constant bloodshed. Yet the benefits were tremendous. But Ethan had no time to linger on the rewards. The guild players before him were already panicking, trying to fall back and regroup with the city guards. They had no choice but to retreat. In mere moments, his onslaught had reduced a force of more than 100 to barely 40. Among them, 25 were guild leaders themselves, equipped with high-level gear. But even they couldn't withstand Ethan's strikes. At level 62, he towered over their average level of 40 to 50, making every clash an instant kill. Only the heavily armored shield tanks had managed to stall him, and only because the narrow wall let them block his advance with their massive shields. How can this be? My advanced analysis won't even show his level. A level 45 player cried. You think you're alone? I'm 46 and I can't see his stats either. Another shouted back. Advanced analysis could only identify enemies up to 15 levels above. Beyond that, all it returned was a wall of question marks. Ethan was well beyond their reach. The forums said he was only level 60. Has he already leveled again? Someone yelled. That was 3 days ago. Who knows how high he is now? Retreat. Fall back. We'll regroup with the guards. He can't be higher level than them. Yeah, and don't forget, we all got the system notification. Reinforcements are on the way. Once more players arrive, we'll bury him under sheer numbers. The guild elites who had strutted onto the battlefield like conquerors now scrambled like stray dogs, tripping over each other in their rush to escape. Their arrogance had vanished, replaced by raw survival instinct. At the rear, Iron Seraph, Guild Master of Judgment, remained quiet. A strange glimmer lit his eyes as he occasionally glanced back. Every time Ethan hurled another tank aside, killing 1 or 2 more players in the chaos, Iron Seraph's lips curled into a faint, unsettling smile. Chapter 559. Breaking through the shield line. Ethan was starting to lose his patience. The survivors who hadn't fled yet were stubbornly clinging to the fight. For shield tanks stood in formation at the front, while 3 healing shamans hovered behind them, ready to mend every bruise and cut. The barbarian shield tanks braced their massive shields against him, but each time he struck, they went flying through the air, only to be fully restored seconds later by the shaman's relentless healing. It was like trying to squash cockroaches. They just wouldn't stay down. Ethan's eyes flicked past them toward the distance, where 25 players were already fleeing. Those were the ones he truly wanted. He recognized the emblem on one of their chests and, even more clearly, the smirk on his face. That was Iron Seraph, guild leader of the Judgment Guild. In his previous life, this very man had obtained the immortality divine ability. Ethan also knew what Iron Seraph and his crew didn't. Just as he had received his quest, the opposing Carnage faction would have been issued a hidden system announcement of their own. The details didn't matter, the result was obvious. Their mission would be the opposite of his. A rallying cry for every Carnage player to hunt him down, sweetened with rich rewards. But there was one advantage Ethan held that most of them wouldn't realize. City guards never intervened in wars between opposing factions. If a hostile faction's attack was triggered, the guards withdrew entirely, leaving the players to tear each other apart. Iron Seraph's plan to regroup with the guards outside the city wall was doomed from the start. The shield tanks before Ethan were masters at their craft. Every time he tried to blast one over the wall, they shifted their shields in midair, converting the outward force into backward momentum that kept them within the fight. Ethan couldn't help but admire their skill. The Carnage faction's adaptability really is on another level, he muttered under his breath. The more he fought them, the clearer it became. In his last life, even with the Survivor faction's overwhelming numbers and higher levels, they had still been crushed by the Carnage players. Only when survivors improved their individual combat skill did they claw back lost territory. But they had never managed to truly pierce the Shadow Realm. Ethan narrowed his eyes. I'm done playing with you. He stepped back, and the sudden movement made the tanks hesitate. Fear rippled through them. The Druid God's power was monstrous. His strikes stronger than any dungeon boss they had faced. Every clash rattled their bones and sent their shields ringing. Normally, getting knocked back as a tank was a death sentence. The only thing keeping them alive was the favorable terrain and the tireless shamans. Still, discouragement seeped into them. Compete over who could kill him first? What a joke. Surviving even one encounter with him was a miracle in itself. As main tanks, they knew better than anyone the role they played. A team's survival depended on their decisions, their judgment of when to advance or retreat. After a handful of exchanges, they already knew the truth. This fight wasn't worth it. They would need to warn their guild leaders not to risk everything chasing after Ethan. And besides, he could fly. They couldn't. At their current levels, 40s at best, none had reached the 60s required for aerial combat. Even then, they would still need to tame flying mounts before they could properly engage in the sky. Meanwhile, Ethan didn't need cast times or mounts. He could simply take off whenever he pleased. Agile, unpredictable, unrelenting. Was this truly what druids were capable of? No one knew. In this era, no druid had even reached level 60. The class was poorly understood, awkward in dungeons, unreliable in duels. Their only saving grace was the feral path, capable of delivering brutal burst damage when ambushing a target in the wild. A tank might barely survive the 5-second onslaught, but if the combo failed to kill, the druid's strength collapsed. They had no stealth like rogues, no clever tricks to escape, only speed to run away. Versatile but also maddeningly inconsistent. And yet, in sheer flexibility, nothing compared. Instant stag form to sprint, instant owl form to take flight, it was freedom no other class possessed. The shield tanks had been battered, healed, and battered again. At this point, they were alive only because of the shamans. So when Ethan suddenly leapt back and declared he was finished, a wave of relief passed through them. The two in front cautiously peeked out from behind their shields. Charge! The word made them flinch. Didn't he just say he was done? One whispered, shivering. But before the thought finished, white light seared their vision. Ethan, now in owl form, unleashed a solar flare. Their eyes burned. Their heads snapped back behind their shields, and in that instant his massive form slammed into them. Thud! Both tanks were sent flying, but this time they couldn't angle their shields properly. One was blasted back into the city, the other flung out into the open plains. Still got time to warn each other? Then you two can go down as well. Ethan roared. He pivoted to the rear line. His fists hammered the remaining two tanks' shields. They tried to adjust, having clashed with him before, but even their perfect technique couldn't stop his power. Both were knocked off balance, shields ripped wide. With a mocking grin, Ethan shifted again, his bare form melting into a rotund bird. He lifted his wings in a strange gesture, almost like a priest offering prayer. At that moment, thick vines burst from the ground beneath the tanks, wrapping around their legs and dragging them back down before they could be hurled away. Snap! Snap! The vines broke from the sheer force of their bodies, but not before pain surged through their systems, stunning them as if they'd been struck with a control skill. Off you go! Typhoon! The plump owl beat its stunted wings, summoning a furious gale that lifted the helpless tanks and tossed them in opposite directions. One crashed inside the city, the other outside the wall. All 4 shield tanks had been dismantled in 3 seconds flat. Ethan straightened and set his eyes on the last obstacle. Only 3 shamans remained, frozen in place at a distance of 40 meters. We'll just go ourselves," one of them blurted. He exchanged a glance with his companions, then without hesitation leapt from the city wall. The others followed suit, dropping off rather than risk being slaughtered directly by Ethan. Better to lose a little experience than be humiliated. Ethan ignored them. His gaze had already shifted back to the 25 guild leaders, who were still sprinting around the outskirts of the town. Chapter 560. The Druid God vs. 25. The official homepage of Ethereal exploded with a headline that dominated every screen, refreshed in real time as billions of players logged on. The Druid God returns, trapped in hostile territory. Will the legend end? Live broadcast. WCC Radio, Carnage Faction Substation. The post had only been live for a few moments, but already the comment section was flooding with billions of replies. A live broadcast link pulsed at the top of the page, updating second by second. Everyone, pay attention. A voice cut through the feed, shaky with barely contained excitement. I'm reporting live from San Lorenzo town. Behind me you can see the city wall, where an unbelievable battle is unfolding. It's the Druid God himself, fighting against the top 25 guild leaders of the Carnage faction. And to be precise, this isn't a battle. It's a massacre. The broadcaster hesitated for a beat before pressing on. All right, we just secured new broadcast permissions through the Ethereal system. Switching now. Aerial view. The perspective suddenly shifted, the camera pulling high above the battlefield. WCC Radio, once a minor station, had clearly grown influential enough to secure these rare permissions, and the world was riveted. Survivor faction players made up the majority of the audience, but even neutral and Carnage-aligned users tuned in, unable to look away. The feed showed Ethan, the so-called Druid God, smoothly maneuvering for massive shield tanks away from the wall as though they were mere pawns in his game. Chat instantly detonated. Inkwell, can druids even do that? Am I seeing this right? Corner Squatter, you're not wrong, bro. I'm so busy. What the hell? Isn't this guy supposed to be some god-tier player? Why doesn't he just wipe them out already instead of playing with them? Trash. That last comment lit a fuse. 10086. Hey, I'm so busy. Do you feel smarter after getting diagnosed with brain rot? 10010. Nah, he didn't just get smarter. He went to a psych ward, killed a god in his dreams, and came back crazy. 10011. Kid, stupidity's not a buff. You don't respawn smarter. 10,000. Yo, busy? Is your dad a moron too? XXXX. Nah, correction. His dad is his uncle. You guys are too polite. I think he's just... Beep. 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 Moderator. Please, stop. I already have too much work keeping this clean. While the chat tore I'm so busy to pieces, Ethan shifted forms. Out of combat, he instantly morphed into an eagle, wings catching the wind as he sped ahead to cut off the fleeing guild leaders. His speed dwarfed theirs, and in a blink, he was circling above them. Should we jump too? A nervous voice piped up from within the fleeing crowd. Heads snapped toward the source. A dark-skinned man, who had been running with his eyes closed as though invisible, suddenly cracked them open and grinned, flashing teeth unervingly white in the gloom. For a moment everyone froze, startled he was even there. Most had assumed he'd already been taken out. Had this man chosen an assassin class, he might have been a terrifying threat. Instead, he was a healer, which made his ability to blend in even more absurd. In dungeon runs, raid leaders often had to pause mid-count, scouring the party to make sure he hadn't slipped away unnoticed. Yet because he was a guild leader, no one dared complain. Jump? You'd embarrass yourself further, scoffed the leader of River Empire, a towering weapon master who carried a great sword across his back. He drew the massive blade with slow determination. I'd rather die with honor than grovel my way out. But his eyes betrayed him. The courage was already gone. The will to fight was more pride than conviction. And for a weapon master, courage wasn't optional. Without it, defeat was inevitable. Damn it, let's just go, growled the Desert Sands guild leader, ranked second among carnage. He drew his longbow and loosed an arrow in one fluid motion, faster even than River Empire's blade. Ethan touched down lightly on the ground, prepared to exchange a few words with these so-called titans of carnage. Instead, the arrow whistled straight for his chest the instant his boots hit the dirt. Holy! Ethan twisted aside, the shaft grazing his side. The shot had been so precise it could have crippled him had it landed. He turned sharp eyes on the archer, only to see the man himself staring in disbelief. It hadn't been foresight. It had been blind luck. Still, luck or not, the gauntlet had been thrown. The weapon master roared and launched his leap slash. Ethan braced, pole rising as he shifted forms, massive bare limbs rippling with power. With a deafening crack, paw met steel, and the great sword veered wildly off course, smashing harmlessly against the wall. Gasps echoed across the lives. The weapon master landed, stunned that his unstoppable attack had been so casually brushed aside. He barely had time to rise before Ethan stepped in close. One colossal swipe of his arm, and his palm struck the warrior's head like a hammer. The stun effect triggered instantly. 3 seconds later, the guild leader was on his knees, dazed and broken, staring up at the druid god. For a moment, even the roaring chat froze in silence. Anonymous warrior. No way. The leap slash. You can counter that. Every warrior in the game knew the truth. Leap slash was not something you blocked. You dodged or you died. Attempting to parry it usually got you flattened, even if you had a counter skill prepared. Yet Ethan hadn't parried. He hadn't even used a defensive skill. He had simply slapped the blade in its weakest spot, redirecting the blow with uncanny precision. Experts in the audience immediately dissected the maneuver. Ethan had not only dodged the lucky arrow but instantly calculated the precise angle where the weapon master's force collapsed. And he had acted in the split-second window available. Coincidence? Or proof that the druid god was everything the legends claimed? If this was skill, then all the rumors, bug exploits, black market tech, gear hacks died here. Ethan's display was a slap across the faces of every so-called analyst and keyboard warrior who had written him off. The truth was undeniable. His gear was strong, yes, and his level was high, but he wasn't recklessly tanking blows. Every step, every counter was deliberate. He didn't waste a single movement. For the first time since Ethereal launched, the world was seeing Ethan fight at full strength. And no one dared speak as he dismantled the guild leaders one by one. The chat, normally a storm of chatter, froze into reverent silence as thousands leaned in, desperate not to miss a flicker of his movements. Though they knew recordings would circulate later, no one wanted to blink and miss the live broadcast. Some even leapt to their feet, fists pumping as though they themselves were in the fray. One man, alone, standing against the top 25 leaders of the Carnage faction. As for the old rumors that he had glitched his way into enemy territory, no one brought them up anymore. The truth was plain. Even if a bug had carried him here, only skill had kept him alive. Could anyone else have done the same? Not a chance. They would have been slaughtered instantly. And across forums, message boards, and live chats, players who had once ridiculed the druid god now fell quiet, swallowing their envy along with their own words. Chapter 561. The Head on the Tower. 24 bodies lay scattered across the narrow city wall at Ethan's feet. He stopped before the man standing opposite him. "What exactly are you smiling about?" Ethan asked, frowning. He didn't recognize the man's face, not even a little. And yet, there was something faintly familiar about him. From the moment Ethan had set foot on the wall, this guy had been grinning at him. Sometimes his lips would twitch upward into something smug, almost mocking. Even earlier, when he turned to run, he had kept glancing back with that same damned smile. It was that smile that made Ethan uneasy, a smile that felt like déjà vu. "Nothing much," the man said, voice smooth and self-assured. "Just that, seeing your in-game self, I finally understand. My old rival Marcus Skaner didn't lose unfairly." The man was Iron Seraph, leader of the Judgment Guild. Marcus Skaner? Ethan's expression darkened. His words came slow and deliberate, carrying nothing but disdain. "Your rival? I never once considered him mine." Their conversation, like everything here, was being broadcast live. Far to the north, inside the Blade Syndicate Guild Hall, Marcus Skaner heard his name. For a moment he froze, face twisting. Then rage exploded out of him. "Damn you to hell!" He knew instantly his humiliation was being aired to the entire world. On the live feed, his name was already spreading like wildfire. Viewer A: "Who the hell is Marcus Skaner?" Viewer B: "No idea. Probably some nobody." Viewer C: "Nonsense. He's the guild leader of that infamous moron squad. Blade Syndicate, up in the northern frontier region. Careful. Say that too loud and he'll come after you." Viewer D: "Ha! I'm from the southern frontier. Tell him to come here. I'll strip him naked and punish him until his own mother wouldn't recognize him." Viewer E: "Bro above, what the hell is wrong with your tastes? I'm about to puke my dinner." Marcus saw the flood of comments, kicked aside the girls lounging at his side, and stormed to his feet, overturning chairs and provoking shrieks. He was seconds away from smashing the table when one of his own guild members piped up. See? That guy said we're famous after all. He called us the Northern Frontier's most infamous guild. Famous. Marcus' eyes went red. In a single motion, he drew his sword and cracked the idiot across the forehead with the flat of the blade. "Famous? You're dead. Get this clown respawned back in the starter zone." His guild cowered. Marcus was shaking with fury, and Iron Seraph's next words only twisted the knife deeper. On the broadcast, Iron Seraph's smug grin faltered briefly before he sneered. "You're right. That fool Skaner was never worthy of being our opponent. He was just amusing, like walking a dog." The impact of his words hit harder than the chat comments. This was Iron Seraph, leader of Judgment Guild, spitting on Marcus Skaner in front of the world. Ethan laughed. "Us? Are you really putting yourself in that us? You're not worthy. But you got one thing right. You and Marcus are both idiots." His grin widened as he reached out, one massive hand clamping around Iron Seraph's throat. "But between the two of you, you're worse. At least Skaner could last a few rounds against me. You're nothing. And so is your precious Carnage faction." The sound of bones crunching echoed across the wall. Ethan's fingers tightened, and Iron Seraph's neck snapped clean through. As the body collapsed, Ethan caught the head in his palm and stared at it, frowning. The man hadn't revived. Strange. In Ethereal, once your body was destroyed, you could only return through graveyard resurrection. Yet even with his head dangling in Ethan's hand, Iron Seraph wasn't clicking the prompt. "What are you playing at?" Ethan muttered. He sighed, reached into his bag, and pulled out a weapon. "What a waste of a silver tier spear," he said with a grimace. Shifting back into human form, he replaced his Twilight War spear with the new weapon. With a flick of his wrist, he impaled Iron Seraph's head on the tip, then hurled the spear with a sharp snap of his arm. The silver shaft arced through the sky, glittering in the sunlight, before slamming into the tallest tower in town. Iron Seraph's head remained pinned there for all to see. In spirit form, Iron Seraph stood in the town square, staring at the spectacle with his lips twitching faintly upward. "Guild leader, please revive quickly," one of his guildmates begged. Ethan's humiliation of them was complete, but Iron Seraph only sneered. "They say the higher you climb, the harder you fall. Let him strut. I'll let him." Then he logged off, leaving Judgment Guild in chaos. On the walls, Ethan pulled up the hood of his black cloak. His voice carried like steel. "If you want to fight, then fight. If not, then get out of my way." He leapt down from the wall and strode into the city. For the first time, the Druid God's face was being revealed to the world. The WCC commentator practically screamed into the mic. "Look at him. That's the Druid God. This broadcast will go down in history. Give it up for the Druid God." Carnage faction players stood frozen as Ethan walked toward the town center. No one moved to stop him. They stared at the bloody head nailed to the tower, and one by one, they stepped back to clear a path. The swagger they had shown earlier was gone, replaced by a chill in their hearts. On the live stream, even the viewers went silent, transfixed by the killing intent radiating through their screens. It was as if Ethan had climbed out of a sea of blood and corpses. He entered the city hall, leaving the crowd stunned. Inside, Ethan let out a long breath. He had been bluffing the entire time. If anyone had blocked him, he would have turned and run without hesitation. The town had already swelled to hundreds of thousands of players. The numbers were only rising. Conquering a town alone was absurd. But he had gambled and won. Transforming into a panther, Ethan bounded up the stairs toward the mayor's office. If the man was some mutated boss, so be it. He had to take him down quickly, claim the rewards, and escape before the horde outside realized his bluff. Otherwise, his prize would vanish like smoke. Outside the hall, silence lingered before the Carnage players finally erupted. Damn it! There are so many of us. What are we afraid of? Right? We're here for the quest. 500 honor points. I'm not losing that. It's just a game. We can revive. Charge the city hall. Hurry! If the mayor dies, our quest fails. They surged forward, a wave of bodies rushing for the doors. The first to reach the threshold never made it inside. A deafening roar cracked the air as the ground trembled. Above, a vortex tore open the sky, swirling with violet light. From it, a beam of pure energy struck down, piercing the city hall roof in a blaze of purple brilliance. The darkened world lit up in an eerie glow. Chapter 562. Return of the Crowleying God. A sudden disturbance rippled through ethereal, and WCC Radio's live broadcast caught it all. Viewers had been watching as Druid God Ethan walked into San Lorenzo City Hall. The battle outside was winding down, the spectacle nearly finished, and many had already prepared to leave the stream. Then, without warning, the feed jolted violently, shaking the audience out of their lethargy. Whoa, what's Druid God doing now? That aura looks insane. One viewer typed. When isn't his entrance cool? Another shot back. Can you guys stop fanboying for 2 seconds? Someone else retorted. I've got a bad feeling. Whatever's going down in there, it's aimed squarely at him. The live chat erupted with noise again. A storm of hype, concern, and speculation. Inside the building, Ethan hadn't the faintest clue about the chaos outside. All he felt was a deep rumble beneath his feet, a tremor rolling through the city hall floor. His advanced analysis skill triggered automatically. A familiar notification chimed in his head. Ding. Analysis successful. Elderly San Lorenzo. Rank, Elite. Level 60. Health, 3000/3000000. Attack, 685, 30,000. Defense, 1,255, 30,000. Base attributes. Ignores 30% defense, 30% damage reduction. Skills, none. Description. The aging mayor of San Lorenzo. Once powerful, his body now retains less than 1/10 of its former strength. His time is nearly at an end. Ethan frowned. An elite boss, but laughably weak in terms of attack. Just a bloated health pool and little else. The system's own description practically screamed it. This old man was already half dead. Ethan wouldn't have needed to come here at all. The mayor was on borrowed time. For the briefest heartbeat, Ethan hesitated. But hesitation wasn't in his nature. Opportunities weren't gifts, they were prey. And prey was meant to be hunted. Mine. All mine. It's all mine. His mantra thrummed in his chest as he launched into his assault. Rake. Shred. The claws of his panther form tore through the old mayor's health bar, stripping away chunks of flesh and numbers alike. In seconds, 1/5 of the target's health had been erased. The tremor underfoot gnawed at his nerves. Instinct whispered danger. Ethan only pressed harder. Spirit embodiment. Energy surged around him as he triggered his weapon's 10-minute cooldown skill. Still in panther form, he unleashed a blinding flurry of strikes. 16 abilities in 3 seconds, 6 of them chaining into savage bite finishers thanks to sheer luck. The mayor's health plummeted, from millions to hundreds of thousands. Shred. 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 Minus 69,503. Minus 95,604. The old mayor finally collapsed under the assault. His body crumpled as Ethan's last savage bite hit home, a critical weakness strike tearing through what little life force remained. Minus 564,890. Weakness damage. Ding. Quest completed. Slay San Lorenzo. Reward, 50,000 honor points. Honor rank +1. A golden light engulfed Ethan as the rewards settled in. But before he could even breathe, the corpse glowed. A pillar of purple light speared upward through the roof, bathing the dead mayor's body. Ethan froze. Every hair on his body stood on end. What the hell? His voice cracked as dread coiled around his chest. The old man's corpse rose into the air, limbs jerking as though possessed. His eyes flew open, no longer glassy with death but burning with a twisted agony. Run. The voice rang in Ethan's mind like a thunderclap. Morzan spoke for the first time in ages, and in his tone lay something Ethan had never heard before. Fear. Ding. San Lorenzo town defense failed. All players in San Lorenzo lose 500 honor points. The notification echoed across the Carnage faction. Despair rippled through the ranks. Players screamed in outrage as their honor points dropped. Some were lucky. The ones who hadn't arrived yet only lost what little they had. But those who had been present stared at the stark -500, next to their stats with ashen faces. The outrage went public in seconds. A Carnage player posted the notification to the WCC livestream, immediately blaming Druid God for the loss. What are you even talking about? Your dad also your uncle or something? One viewer mocked. Losses are deserved. Two factions are enemies, you moron. Go play solitaire if you can't handle it. Another idiot spotted. Unbelievable. If you can't take a dump, are you gonna blame Earth's gravity next? The complaints drowned instantly beneath a tidal wave of ridicule. But before the argument could peak, the live broadcast abruptly cut out. The feed went black. Hey, what's going on? Why cut it now? Bring the stream back. Don't you dare end it here. This is insane. WCC's gonna go bankrupt if they keep this up. Wait, stop shouting. Look at the system notification. A single player's message silenced the mob. Ethereal, emergency shutdown. Login will be disabled shortly. Please log off promptly to avoid unnecessary losses. Countdown, 15 seconds. Players across the world blinked in disbelief. Another shutdown? With only 15 seconds? Too late for anyone to react. The game winked out. Ethereal's world went dark, and millions opened their eyes in reality, ripped out of immersion. They told us to log off, so why kick us out? Frustrated players grabbed phones, jumped on PCs, hammered Ethereal's official website with questions. No answers came. Their messages vanished into silence. Inside the purple glow, Ethan was still running. Morzan's voice drove him forward. He burst from City Hall expecting Carnage players waiting outside. But the streets were empty. Not a single soul. What the hell happened? He muttered. I pulled them out. Morzan's voice rang inside his skull. If they'd stayed, they would have died. And not just in the game. Ethan's eyes widened. Real deaths? From a game event? He looked around, and only then did he notice the world itself had changed. The once-night sky burned with violet light. A vast vortex churned above, swallowing stars and spilling an aura of pure malice. You did this? Morzan said grimly. Me? Ethan almost laughed at the absurdity. How the hell could I? It's here. That final statement cut through everything. The purple beam from the vortex thinned, focused, and detonated into a blinding flash. Ethan raised an arm to shield his face. When the brilliance faded, the city hall behind him cracked and exploded outward. From the debris rose a shrieking voice. Caw, caw, caw. Little human. I found you again. This time my true form descends. Let's see where you run. Ethan's blood ran cold. Hovering above the ruined city hall was the very same old mayor he had just slain. Only the nameplate told the real story. Crowleying God in Zoo, Pseudo-Divine, LV.200. Ethan's mouth went dry. He knew that name. He knew exactly what this was. And Morzan had been right. This was his fault. It all traced back to the Druid camp during his owl form specialization quest. The final step should have been simple. Lower the Crowleying chief to 30% health, survive the ambush, and escape. But Ethan hadn't played by the rules. He'd gambled. He'd calculated his DPS and killed the boss outright. The reward? A dark gold staff of terrifying power, Wraithbinder's staff. It was still locked away in the Renegade Alliance's vault, waiting for a warlock insane enough to hit the 800 intelligence requirement. No one in the game could wield it yet, though Meatball had coveted it since day one. Whether he ever could? Well, time would tell. Back then, Ethan hadn't realized what he'd unleashed. Killing the chief outright had warped the quest's natural course. Later, in Duskridge, when the Crowleying God's avatar had nearly killed him, he barely survived thanks to Roland Carter and the Godslayer crossbow. But now there was no avatar. No fragment. No convenient savior. The Crowleying God had descended in its true form. a level 200 pseudo-divine boss, and it was staring directly at him. Chapter 563. The Crowleying God Awakens. Ethan stared blankly at the old man floating in the air, his eyes fixed on the shimmering name above the figure's head. What's even the point anymore? I might as well surrender. A level 200 pseudo-divine boss. The words burned into his mind. Against something like that, what chance did he have? Escaping was already near impossible, let alone fighting. If you never want to see your girlfriends again, you can always choose surrender. Morzen's mocking voice echoed in his head, a mixture of amusement and scorn. Why? Ethan shot back, remembering what Morzen had said earlier, about kicking players out of ethereal to keep them from dying in real life. Its true form has descended into the passage between the ninth universe and the desolate domain, Morzen explained quickly. What you're looking at is just a vessel. The real Crowleying God hasn't shown itself yet. It's built up a mountain of faith power by gathering zealots like a cult, using that energy to deceive ethereal's order perception. If that faith power infects the system, then every player's soul here, they won't be able to resist. His voice faltered, as though struggling to explain something too vast for words. Forget it, just focus on the problem in front of you. I've already cleared out everything in this world it could possess. But listen well. If you die here, this time you die for real. With that, Morzen went silent. Ethan's pulse quickened. Damn it. Then why didn't you kick me out too? He panicked, instantly sending a command to log out. Ding. System notification. You have been locked. Unable to log out. Tears pricked at his eyes as the words burned across his vision. Where are you going? The old man appeared right in front of him, as if he had warped space itself. Ethan flinched at the suddenness. The figure had descended from the sky faster than the blink of an eye. You destroyed my avatar, desecrated my teachings, obliterated a wisp of my soul. Today, I'll rip out your soul and damn it for generations. Though the figure still looked like the town mayor, his eyes were empty voids glowing with a sinister violet light. Purple mist bled from the sockets, trailing like smoke. You blabbering old fool. The face was so close that Ethan lashed out on instinct, slapping it with all the force he had. Whack. The technique he had crafted, one he never fully understood, triggered again with frightening power. His palm cracked across the old man's face. Graph! The body hosting the Crowleying God reeled in agony, half of its head bursting apart under the strike. Ethan froze. His eyes darted from his hand to the crumpled old man on the ground. What the hell? I didn't even transform. How is that possible? He swallowed hard, muttering. This is supposed to be a level 200 pseudo-divine boss? Are you kidding me? No sooner had he spoken than the corpse twitched. The health bar above it had not moved an inch. A suffocating aura burst forth, purple mist surging in all directions. Teleport? Coordinates. Ethan muttered, already pulling up his divine teleportation ability. 2 coordinates flared on his interface. Blood King's Castle and General's Tomb. He had leveled there once, before heading to the Sea of Death. Without hesitation, he chose the tomb. His earlier strike hadn't triggered combat, so teleportation still worked. A flash of light enveloped him, and in the next instant, he stood at the base of a grassy hill, the mound of General's Tomb looming above. Ethan's clothes clung to his sweat-soaked skin. The last glimpse before teleporting was burned into his mind. The town mayor's corpse ballooning grotesquely, then dissolving into a storm of blood mist. From it rose a colossal Crowleying wreathed in violet flame. The instant its talons had lunged for him, he had barely escaped. Had he hesitated for even a second, he would have been pulverized. The raw terror of that moment left him shaking. He had thought himself beyond fear of death, but the sensation of imminent annihilation gripped him with a primal chill. Caw, caw, caw. The cries of Crowleyings echoed unnaturally across the distance. Ethan turned north and saw a pillar of purple light stabbing skyward. The Crowleying God had already locked onto him. Damn it, I'll risk it. He clenched his teeth and sprinted toward the entrance of General's Tomb. The ground erupted behind him. Boom! The entire hill shuddered. Don't shrink, damn you. Ethan dived into the tomb's entrance, just as the outside world drowned in violet radiance. A massive, lidless eye appeared in the opening, staring in after him. His heart pounded a heartbeat slower and he would have been caught. The creature's speed was insane. What took him 10 minutes in swift flight form, it had covered in seconds. So this is a level 200 pseudo-divine boss? Ethan thought in disbelief. In his past life, divine bosses had been killed, at the cost of thousands of lives. But none of them had ever seemed this unnatural. Caw! Damn you! Let's see how long you can hide. The tomb trembled violently as the monster clawed at the earth above. Dust and pebbles rained down, but the ancient structure held. Its pillars had long since cracked, yet it remained impossibly sturdy. Ethan realized why. Once the creature took its true form, it could no longer shrink. Without a human host, it couldn't enter. Morzan had purged the world of potential vessels, leaving the Crowleying god trapped outside unless it leveled the entire tomb. For the moment, he was safe. Breathing hard, Ethan pressed deeper into the tunnels. He couldn't log out. He couldn't fight. All he could do was move forward and pray the tomb had another exit. He knew this place well. He hurried down the first level, heading toward the passage to the second. But something was different this time. The corpse guards that normally patrolled the level were in chaos, skittering around and staring upward, reacting to the pounding from above. They ignored him completely even though their levels dwarfed his. Interesting. Were they responding only to sound? He slipped past them in stealth until he reached the bend leading to the second floor. As expected, 2 corpse guard warriors stood at the entrance, the same ones that had nearly killed him last time. He activated Advanced Analysis. A familiar chime rang in his ears. Corpse Guard Warrior. Rank, Elite. Level, 77. Health, 3,850,000 / 3,850,000. Attack, 38,500. Defense, 38,500. Base attributes, ignores 30% defense, 30% damage reduction. Skills, Savage Cleave. Savage Cleave concentrates all power to deal 300% physical attack damage to the enemy. Cooldown, 8 seconds. Ethan's eyes narrowed at the additional line under base attributes. Monsters above level 60 had started spawning with new mechanics. Ignoring defense meant that no matter how solid your armor was, 30% of it might as well not exist. Damage reduction meant that every strike you landed would hit for 30% less. To a casual player, the difference was manageable. But for those with high-end builds, the effect scaled brutally. If you normally dealt 1,000 damage per hit, 300 of it simply vanished every swing. Over time, the loss was devastating. It was Ethereal's way of forcing balance. Yet no one stopped grinding for better stats. Everyone dreamed of climbing higher, of standing out, of becoming someone who mattered. Players who had nothing in the real world came here chasing recognition, fame, and power. No one wanted to stay ordinary. Who wouldn't want to be like Druid God? Known by all, admired by friends, swarmed by women, envied by rivals. In a world like this, the chance to matter was worth bleeding for. Chapter 564. The Invisible Executioner. Outside Ember City, in a luxurious villa, Henry Joe sat on a velvet couch, scrolling through Ethereal's official homepage with a faint smile tugging at his lips. Maintenance again? Could it be because of him? He murmured, tilting his head. So, Zachary's plan fell apart. What a useless man. His voice carried an oddly smooth, almost alluring quality, the kind that would send shivers down the spine of anyone listening. And if Ethan had been there to witness that perpetual smile, he would have recognized it instantly. It was the same smile worn by Iron Seraph, the feared guild master of Judgment Guild in the Carnage faction. Henry was a man of contradictions. He surrounded himself with women, yet showed no real interest in them, and every one of them eventually disappeared without a trace. His master, the very culprit behind Jay Taylor's death, was a soul wielder, or rather a curse caster. That enigmatic figure never revealed a face, never initiated contact except on their own terms, leaving Henry powerless to reach out first. Even his recent meeting with Zachary Steele had been arranged at his master's suggestion. After Henry and Ivy were tossed out of the room, Zachary stayed behind with the old man. Henry didn't know what had been discussed, but his gut told him it had everything to do with the so-called Druid God. Druid God, Ethan, the Silverwood family, Lila, and those 3, Henry muttered, brows furrowing. On the surface, Ethan looked like someone riding pure luck, a freeloader who had stumbled from obscurity into prominence. But if he was truly nothing more than a hanger-on, why would Henry's master suddenly show so much interest in him? He slipped off his shoes and stared at his bare feet. The smile twisting his lips grew strained, almost hysterical. All 10 toes had been severed at the root. The wounds were long healed, but the ragged gnaw marks remained, grotesque reminders of some cruel punishment. Old man, Henry whispered, voice trembling with malice. What you did to me, you'll pay back in full. He exhaled slowly, then walked to the desk and flipped over a photograph lying face down. The 4th girl you want me to approach, isn't it? He said softly, pulling open a drawer and laying out 3 more photos. The first, he touched Ivy's picture, his smile thinning. Someone got there first. Failure. The second, Lila Silverwood. Untouchable. Failure. The third. He lifted Jade Taylor's photo, eyes narrowing. Half the plan fell into place, and she walked straight into my hands. Success. He set the picture down and picked up the 4th. Rainy Chin. This one. Another girl tied to Ethan. A low chuckle slipped out of him. All because of a silly high school love letter, 2 women ruined. I wonder what this druid god will think when he realizes. Will he regret it? No, he won't even see it coming. Druid god. You're nothing more than an invisible executioner. The giggle that followed was high-pitched and girlish, out of place coming from a grown man. His laughter faded, and his eyes returned to the photographs. The longer he stared, the deeper his brow furrowed. What is that old man really after? At last, his gaze lingered on Rainey's photograph. Slowly, his brow eased, and the corner of his mouth curled into a knowing smile, though whatever thought crossed his mind remained a mystery. Meanwhile, in another mansion across Ember City, chaos reigned. The room was a wreck, splintered furniture and shattered ornaments scattered across the floor. At the center stood Zachary, shirtless and seething, a katana gripped in one trembling hand. Useless. All of you are useless. He roared, punctuating the words with another slash, splintering the remains of a cabinet. Liam's plan had collapsed, taking with it Zachary's 10 million deposit. But the lost money wasn't what shook him most. It was the meeting with Henry's master earlier that day. He had gone there eager, expecting to gain a powerful ally. Instead, the old man had peeled back every layer of his identity with unsettling ease. The Steel Consortium's hidden dealings, the secret roles passed down through his family for generations. Zachary had nearly drawn his blade then and there, but before he could even think of silencing the man, something else happened. Zachary glanced down at his chest. A tiny red dot marked the skin directly above his heart. From that dot, a pea-sized parasitic worm had burrowed inside, anchoring itself to the very organ that kept him alive. He could feel it there, coiled and waiting. With a single thought, the old man could rupture his heart from within. That was why Zachary had swallowed his pride and obeyed. The parasite left him no choice. His first task: dismantle every foundation he had built in Ethereal. At first Henry had promised that his master could secure him control of Renegade Alliance, and that was why Zachary had come running. But instead of gaining power, he had been shackled like a slave. The meeting had stripped him of money, allies, and even his freedom. His rage boiled over, and his grip tightened on the katana. Ethan, I swear you'll die with no grave to hold you. Deep within the Whitmore family's hidden territory, the night air was broken by urgent knocking. Lila, Victor Grant, Williams, and Celia stood outside Ethan's star chamber. Lila pounded on the door again, but silence answered. What are you all doing here in the middle of the night? A voice called. Blackie and Micah stepped out of a nearby tent, squinting. Oh right, Blackie muttered as he remembered. You went into Ethereal tonight. Why are you all out here already? Emergency maintenance booted us out, Lila explained, her voice laced with worry. But Ethan, he didn't log out. He's still inside somehow. Blackie shrugged. If he's still in, then he's still in. What's the big deal? Lila's face tightened. Last time he got trapped inside the capsule and nearly. She hesitated, then pressed on. Another time, he disappeared completely, only to reappear at your place. Doesn't that strike you as strange? Micah blinked. Wait, are you saying he went in without us? Before anyone could stop him, Blackie marched forward and kicked. Bang! The star chamber door slammed open, crashing straight into Ethan's sleek VR capsule. A piece of tech worth over 12 million. Everyone gawked in stunned silence. Victor froze for a beat, then found himself giving Blackie a reluctant thumbs up. Blackie smirked, lifted his chin, and strode into the chamber first. The others trailed behind cautiously. Thank God! Lila exhaled as she saw the capsule intact. For reasons she couldn't explain, she had feared Ethan might have vanished again, off somewhere only to return with more chaos trailing behind him. Yeah hey. They all turned. Blackie had his fingers jammed into the capsule's edge, face flushed with effort as he tried to pry it open. Stop! Lila shouted. Victor reacted instantly, yanking Celia back just as sparks exploded. ZZZZZZT. A blinding surge of purplish-blue electricity erupted from the capsule. Arg! Blackie screamed. Thud! He flew backward, rolling through the doorway and into the hall. Everyone stared, terrified, at the crackling VR capsule, none daring to get closer. Then they rushed out after him. Celia, get Evelyn, Victor ordered. Okay. Celia darted off, but before she had gone more than a few steps, a voice rang out behind them. Holy crap! That felt amazing. Everyone turned in disbelief. Blackie was sitting up, hair standing on end like he just rubbed a balloon on his head, smoke curling from his lips. Yet instead of agony, his eyes sparkled with exhilaration. Williams muttered under his breath, Did he get his brain fried? Before anyone could answer, Blackie shot to his feet and bolted back inside. ZZZZZZT. Thud. He was blasted out again, then bounced off the floor and sprinted back in. Once, twice, 3 times. By the 4th, the others finally snapped out of their daze. Grab him, Victor shouted. Together, he, Williams, and Micah tackled Blackie to the ground. He thrashed wildly, face twisted between excitement and frustration. Are you insane? Lila demanded. Blackie froze for a moment, then lowered his gaze. Boss lady, tell them to let me go. Please. I've swallowed dozens of energy cores and still couldn't break this bottleneck. But now, I can feel it. I'm about to break through. His eyes burned with desperate joy, and this time no one could mistake the raw conviction in his voice. Chapter 565, The Last 2 Fragments. Inside Ethereal, Ethan had already descended to the 3rd level of the General's tomb. The violent pounding from above, which once shook the walls like the heartbeat of a giant, had dulled into a faint, distant hum. Ding. Alert. Your VR capsule is under external attack. He froze. A quick swipe brought up the 360-degree external feed from his capsule. The hallway outside was chaotic. Everyone had rushed out. Before Ethan could make sense of it, a figure suddenly darted back toward his capsule. What the hell is going on? Ethan muttered. The man, Blackie, hurled himself at the capsule door, eyes wide, grinning with a manic fervor. Yeah, he muttered, clawing at the sealed hatch like a rabid beast. The next second, a bright arc of electricity shot out, throwing him across the floor. The VR capsule's high-voltage failsafe had activated. What in the world is Blackie doing? Ethan barely finished before Blackie charged again. Just a little more, just a little more, just a little more. Blackie mumbled like a lunatic, his body convulsing as another surge sent him sprawling. Again and again he returned, each time only to be blasted away. Ethan's system filled with warning alerts. He tried opening external comms to demand an explanation, only to remember that normal signals didn't penetrate Ethereal. Phone lines, messages, nothing worked. Grimacing, he silenced the alerts. If Blackie wanted to keep frying himself, so be it. With that distraction muted, Ethan turned his focus back to survival. The 3rd level of the tomb wasn't meant for grinding. It was a joint spawning ground for corpse guard warriors and javelin corpses. With ranged enemies in the mix, there was no safe kiting spot. He wasn't here to farm anyway. He was hiding. Finding a corner against a wall where no monsters spawned, Ethan stopped and opened his inventory. He needed a solution. Morrison had warned him. If he didn't deal with that creature, he could be trapped here indefinitely. His body was still in the real world, lying inside the capsule. While his capsule was top of the line, over 12 million, complete with nutrient circulation, it wasn't a permanent life support pod. Eventually, the nutrient supply would run dry. Worse, the injection port was locked inside the capsule. That feature, meant to prevent tampering or poisoning from the outside, now worked against him. If he stayed stuck here, he would wither in his sleep. Ethan's eyes drifted down his item list until they settled on something important. General's Token, Fragment. Description. Combine 100 fragments to form a General's Token. Holders may enter the General's Hall without obstruction. Note: the first time a monster is killed, the drop rate is higher. Only 100 fragments exist across the entire tomb. He checked his total, 29 fragments. He needed 71 more. Legend said the General's Hall sat on the deepest level of this dungeon. Yet in his previous life no one had ever entered. By the 8th floor, the monsters were already level 147. The density of undead increased with every descent, and the 9th floor was a nightmare. Countless javelin corpses, levels reaching 157, all clustered at the entrance. Anyone who entered was instantly shredded by a storm of spears. Even the strongest tanks couldn't last a second. Only divine judicators, advanced paladins, could endure with their invincible 8-second divine shield. But the monster's AI was too smart. They refused to attack shielded targets, waiting until the shield dropped before unleashing hell. Teams tried using squads of judicators, but even then, 8 seconds wasn't enough. The melee fighters couldn't bring down even a single corpse before they were torn apart. Every plan had failed. Ethan stared at the fragments, a slow smile forming. In his past life, thousands of players had passed through the tomb. The fragments had scattered across countless hands. A few collectors tried to buy them all, but 3 were never found. The deal collapsed. This time, however, he was alone. Every fragment dropped here belonged to him. If the General's Token unlocked the hall, what waited inside? A superboss? A trap? Morrison, the one who'd hinted at the existence of Ethereal's cosmic brain, wouldn't design something useless. It had to serve a greater purpose. Resolved, Ethan closed his inventory. He needed fragments, which meant more monsters had to die. The third floor was suicide for someone at his level, 62 against level 87 monsters, many of them ranged. Grinding there was impossible. So he would return to the second floor. Last time, he had slain hundreds of corpse guard warriors and pulled 29 fragments. That drop rate was promising. The description hinted that first kills had higher chances of dropping, and since Ethan was killing enemies far above his level, his odds were even better. If he wiped the entire second floor clean, perhaps he could gather the rest of the fragments. He wasted no time. Back on the second floor, the ceiling above still thundered. That damned creature never tired, hammering endlessly. Yet despite the countless stone supports it had shattered, the tomb endured. General's tomb was built to last. Ethan mapped out the terrain, marking broken pillars as lures for kiting. Then he went to work, dragging wave after wave of undead behind him like some grotesque shepherd. Switching to his artifact weapon from the starter zone, his damage output surged. With his level now at 62, his true damage stat reached 124. Against monsters with millions of health it was still modest, but with his damage overtime effects and wide area skill stacked, his efficiency soared. Every strike splashed damage across hundreds of targets. 10,000 health shaved away here, 10,000 there. Slowly but surely, the warriors fell in droves. Days blurred together. Ethan fought endlessly, his only rhythm the ceaseless thunder above. Meanwhile, in the real world, chaos spread. 3 days had passed, and Ethereal had been locked in server maintenance. Half a year since launch, players had grown addicted to nightly logins. Now, deprived for 3 consecutive nights, the entire world fidgeted like addicts denied their fix. Questions flooded the official site, but as always, they disappeared without response. Ethereal had never released statements, updates, or patch notes. It was a game run by ghosts. Normally, such silence would have killed a game long ago. But this wasn't any game. It was the only true virtual reality system in existence. Every competitor had died before launch, bought out, or shut down. If you didn't play Ethereal, there was simply nothing else to play, unless you considered Minesweeper an alternative. In the Whitmore family's hidden estate, Ethan's body still lay locked inside his capsule. Lila kept vigil by his side. Over the months, she had seen too much strange, too much unexplainable around Ethan. Once, she would have scoffed at talk of other dimensions or underworlds. But now her worldview had cracked. There really were universes beyond universes. 7 days slipped by. Ethereal had not reopened. Ethan's capsule ran out of nutrient fluid 2 days ago. Lila had barely left his side since. Astrid often kept her company. Of all the women around Ethan, Astrid seemed most attached to her, though she would occasionally wander off when hunger gnawed. Even the others visited often. Ethan could see them all through the capsule's cameras. Inside Ethereal, his expression darkened. Watching Lila's sleepless, haggard face through the feed filled him with unease. The pounding above had reached a new intensity. 2 days earlier, just as the system had warned him his nutrient reserves had expired, he had heard it. The catastrophic roar of stone collapsing. The first level of the tomb had caved in. His eyes flicked back to his inventory. 98 fragments. 2 more. Just 2 more. On the second day of his grinding, he'd overheard Victor and Williams speaking outside his room. Leo was missing. Markham had confirmed the entrance to the Whitmore territory had been opened once from the inside. Only Leo could have done it. Each of them carried a temporary access token bound by blood essence. No one else could use them. Ethan clenched his fists. 98 fragments. 2 more. Lila's tired face haunted him. Above, the tomb shook again. Huge stones broke free, smashing into the ground. Then, without warning, the ceiling split open. A beam of violet light pierced the darkness, carving a hole the size of a truck. Ethan's heart sank. Chapter 566. The last shard in the flames. The barrier of the general's tomb's second level had sprung a leak. A jagged hole gaped open, fragments of shattered wards scattered across the stone, and the rumble of collapsing boulders shook the chamber like the growl of some ancient beast. Ethan's heart pounded. He forced his hands to move faster, cycling through his skills with frantic precision. 2 minutes later, the final wave of monsters crumpled under his strikes, their corpses spilling out a rain of loot across the ground. Clatter. Among the scattered weapons and armor, a sharp gleam of darkness caught his eye. Ethan's pulse spiked. Without hesitation, he leapt from the broken pillar where he had been fighting. It was a general's token shard. Snatching it up, he sprinted for the stairs leading to the third level. One quick glance at his inventory told him everything he needed to know. General's token shard. 99. Just 1 more. 1 more and the set would be complete. Caw, caw, caw. Where do you think you're running off to, little worm? The mocking voice made him freeze. A monstrous crow's head forced its way through the hole in the barrier. Purple flames blazed across its feathers, and its glowing eyes fixed on Ethan with hungry menace. "You son of a... Why don't you come down here instead of hiding, you overgrown chicken?" Ethan yelled back, his voice carrying more bravado than sense. "Little worm. Die!" The Crowleying god screeched, flames roaring in its eyes as it unleashed a surge of energy. Its beak opened wide, and a torrent of violet power erupted, screaming toward the stone floor. "Damn! A ranged attacker." Ethan's body stiffened. Swift stride. Power flared through his boots, boosting his speed by 70%. His figure blurred, leaving behind a phantom trail as the wave of purple annihilation slammed into the ground he'd been standing on. Stone scorched black in an instant, but the crow wasn't finished. It spat beam after beam of searing violet light, each one tearing gouges through the tomb, the shrieks of impact echoing in relentless succession. Ethan's lungs burned as he zigzagged desperately, his swift stride seconds slipping away. "You're playing dirty. Stop spitting. You feathered bastard," he shouted between breaths. "Caw, caw, caw. Why don't you stop running then, little worm? Caw your sister. I'll stop running if you stop spitting. Caw. I'll stop if you're not afraid." Their exchange devolved into a string of absurd insults, man and monster trading taunts like two drunk gamblers. But while Ethan's words dripped with sarcasm, his grin was genuine. The thing really was dim-witted, just like the old fable of the crow and the fox. Sure enough, the Crowleying god's attack slowed, distracted by its own outrage. That tiny delay was enough. Ethan angled himself toward the third-level entrance and pushed his weary body forward. "Caw, caw. You despicable worm. You tricked me." The crow realized too late. It thrashed against the barrier, adjusting its massive body and swiveling its fiery head back toward Ethan. Ethan's eyes flicked across his skill bar. Swift Stride's cooldown was almost up. Divine teleportation. Still useless. He cursed himself. He should have marked a point on the third level earlier. And worse, blocking his way at the stairs were a dozen corpse guard warriors, hulking and unmoving, remnants of a group he had dragged earlier but outrun. He narrowed his eyes, running the math in his head. Either he kite them away in a loop and came back, or he forced a breakthrough when Swift Stride came back online. But that would mean eating at least 2 hits. Could he take 2 strikes from a level 77 monster? Even at level 69, after 7 grueling days of non-stop fighting, the answer was grim. His gear was reinforced to plus 30, but low-tier trash. Even in bear form, his defense barely scraped past 10,000. The warriors hit with 38,000 base attack. Their Savage Cleave tripled that damage every 8 seconds. The first strike would absolutely be Savage Cleave. That was more than 100,000 damage in one swing. A chill threaded through his spine. No, it was safer to lure them away first. "Little worm. You think you'll escape again? Die!" The Crowleying god's screech cut through the chamber. Ethan looked up, bracing for another barrage. But this time, no beam came. Instead, a sphere of molten violet began to swell in its throat, its glow so intense that Ethan's stomach clenched. Not good. This wasn't another random strike. It was charging something devastating. If that thing unleashed a full-scale area spell, Ethan would be nothing but ash. Against the corpse guard warriors, he couldn't afford a single hit. Against this crow, not even immortality would save him if the damage exceeded his limits. That wasn't just a monster. That was a level 200 pseudo-divine entity. Not a game AI but a true invader of this world. And it wasn't alone. It carried faith energy. Divine authority Ethan couldn't even begin to understand. Morzan. Where the hell had he gone? It had been 7 days, and the bastard hadn't so much as answered a call. No time for that now. Ethan's jaw tightened. Swift Stride's cooldown blinked ready. He still had the immortality divine ability. Worst case scenario, he'd burn a charge here and pray it was worth it. The crow shrieked, spitting the fireball from its maw. A purple sun plummeted toward the earth, radiating so much heat that Ethan's skin seared before it even touched. The sheer sight of it left him reeling, a hallucinatory haze clawing at his mind. His breath caught. Not toward him. The fireball's arc bent, not for his body, but for the stairs. The crow meant to obliterate the path. No. No, no, no. Ethan roared, bolting forward. The impact came like the wrath of gods. Boom. The fireball slammed into the ground, ripping the air apart. A storm of flame and shockwave hurled Ethan across the tomb. He smashed into a stone pillar hard enough to see stars, damage numbers flashing across his vision. Minus 13,594. He staggered upright, head ringing. He didn't know if it was the fireball or the collision that hit harder. Instinct screamed louder than pain. He ducked behind the pillar, shoving his hands into the motions of healing. Tree form. Rejuvenation. Healing touch. His health ticked upward as the storm raged on. For 30 endless seconds, violet fire tore through the chamber, the wind howling like a hurricane. When it finally eased, Ethan dared to peek out. The Crowleying god twisted its head, searching. Luckily, the pillar gave him cover, hiding him in a blind spot. Through the shimmering wall of flames, Ethan caught sight of the staircase. His heart stilled. The entrance still stood. The crow hadn't destroyed it. Phew! He exhaled, slumping for a moment in sheer relief. 7 days, and the creature had only managed to punch a hole big enough for its head. His progress was slower than he'd feared. Then he saw it. Amidst the dancing purple flames at the foot of the stairs, something dark and solid glimmered faintly. A fragment. The last general's token fragment. The corpse guard warriors that had blocked the stairs were gone, annihilated by the crow's attack. In death, they dropped the final piece he needed. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. He hadn't even planned this far, but fortune had thrown him a gift. Those warriors had been the only monsters on the second floor he hadn't slain, left behind when he'd run too fast. He never imagined they'd be the ones to drop the final fragment. But there it was, the piece that would complete his set. Only one problem remained. It lay in the heart of the crow's violet fire, and the flames showed no sign of going out. Chapter 567. The General Awakens. The bright purple flames blazed with ferocity, spreading their heat across the entire second level of the general's tomb. The temperature climbed rapidly, and the fire shimmered with an otherworldly, dreamlike hue that carried both beauty and menace. Anyone looking at it could easily imagine the devastating power hidden within those infernal flames. Ethan crouched behind a half-broken stone pillar, his gaze fixed on the wall of fire. He quickly checked through his inventory, his skills, every option available to him, and still felt the cold dread settling deeper in his chest. Nothing he had could withstand that kind of damage. The only thing even remotely feasible was his divine ability, immortality. He could throw himself into the flames and rely on the invincibility period after revival to push through. But what if the fire burned him past the point of triggering it? What if immortality failed? After everything Morzan had told him before, Ethan couldn't bring himself to test it blindly. Wait, second avatar, he muttered, opening his control panel. A flicker of consciousness split away as he summoned the rogue avatar, forcing himself to focus entirely on its control. The avatar activated sprint and launched straight toward the wall of fire. The instant the rogue appeared, even in stealth, the massive crow circling above locked onto it like a predator spotting prey. Its beak opened, glowing as another blast built. Shadow step. With a sharp command, the rogue vanished in a blur, reappearing at the very edge of the flames. The crow's energy beam cut through empty space, leaving nothing but smoke and the echo of its shriek. Ethan's lips curved in satisfaction. The rogue's agility felt so much smoother, so much more natural than the druid-class Morzan had saddled him with. Cloak of Shadows. Dark energy shimmered around the rogue's body, shielding it from all magic for 3 precious seconds. The avatar dashed into the inferno, heat rolling across its skin. Yet no pain followed. It was as if the flames couldn't even touch him. Ethan's heart steadied. The game mechanics were holding true. Grappling chain. Twin daggers shot forward, connected by a steel cable, embedding into the ground ahead. With a tug, the rogue's body shot forward like a loosed arrow. 1 second of Cloak of Shadows already gone. Only 10 meters left. The general's token fragment gleamed faintly on the scorched ground. Ethan retrieved the daggers and pushed forward at full speed. For a rogue, 10 meters in 2 seconds was nothing. Originally, he had intended for this avatar to be little more than bait, a distraction or sacrifice. But the rogue's sheer survivability was undeniable. With Cloak of Shadows countering any magic user's worst attacks, its high mobility, displacement skills, and force stealth abilities. No wonder the class was known as the King of the Wild. Ethan still remembered Marcus Skainer's despair when he had been hardlocked for 45 seconds back in that dungeon run. Compared to that, being shoved into a druid class by Morzan felt like outright sabotage. The thought only made him curse the old man more under his breath. Up in the sky, the crow stopped firing. Its cruel eyes gleamed as it watched the rogue dive into the flames, clearly savoring the thought of his impending death. But when Ethan's avatar didn't disintegrate instantly, suspicion flickered across its face. Ding. System notification. Avatar acquired item. General's token fragment X1. A grin spread across Ethan's face. It worked. He even had time to flip the bird at the crow through the rogue's hand. Idiot. The word had barely left his lips before a catastrophic number exploded above the rogue's head. -999999999. Critical hit. Ding. System notification. Your avatar has died. Triggering. Passive skill. Feign death. Restoring 20% of maximum health. 99% damage reduction. Lasting 1.5 seconds. Ethan blinked. What the hell? Morzan even unlocked the rogue's divine skill. Feign death. Another streak of purple fire smashed into the rogue. -999999999. Critical hit. Ding. System notification. Your avatar has died. Not even a divine skill had saved it. The rogue dissolved into white light and vanished back into his character panel. Ethan stared at the empty space it had occupied, dumbstruck. What is this thing's damage? Who the hell designed something this broken? The crow cawed again, its beady eyes swiveling toward his pillar. Purple light shimmered in its beak, ready to fire. I've been spotted. Ethan didn't waste a second. His panther form sprang forward, sprinting like a bolt of black lightning. The crow's beam struck the stone pillar, obliterating it into rubble. Dust and fragments flew in every direction, but Ethan was already weaving through the chamber, dodging blast after blast with serpentine footwork. While sprinting, he yanked open the avatar's inventory. The general's token fragment gleamed in the last slot. He dragged it into his own inventory. Use it. The moment he gave the command, the 100 fragments fused into a single dark token, the glow pulsing with an ominous power. Ding. System notification. General's token fragment X100 vanished. Acquired item. General's token. Use it again. Even as he stumbled, nearly blinded by the crow's attacks, Ethan triggered the token. A voice echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant. Who dares disturb my slumber? Ethan froze mid-step. The voice hadn't come from the crow. Came from everywhere. That tone. It was how ancient beings in fiction referred to themselves. Before he could process further, a dark gate materialized in front of him. He had no time to stop and crashed straight through. The world beyond was blindingly bright. He stumbled to a halt inside a stone chamber no larger than 40 meters square, its boundaries sharp and clear. Torches burned along every wall, their flames steady and eternal, as if they had been burning since time immemorial. Ethan barely had time to take it in before the voice thundered again. Young one, was it you? Who disturbed my slumber? Do you know your crime? Crime? Ethan cursed inwardly. Know your crime, my ass. But he kept his mouth shut and turned his eyes to the center of the chamber. There, on a throne carved in exaggerated grandeur, sat a figure. Or rather, a monster. Its massive frame was pitch black, its skull crowned with two savage bull-like horns. The creature's eyes snapped open, and the flames in the chamber seemed to bow to its presence. Humph! I was speaking, young one. How dare you drift off while in my presence? Chapter 568. The Prisoner on the Black Throne. Ethan stared at the creature before him, its eyes as large as bronze bells, yet entirely black, without a trace of white. The darkness seemed bottomless, swallowing his gaze whole. I'll ask you again, the monster rumbled, lifting its head. His voice carried the weight of centuries. Was it you who caused the commotion above? Creak, creak, creak. The sound echoed through the hall as the creature shifted. How long had this thing been sitting here, unmoving? Ethan wondered if its very bones had rusted in place. The noise wasn't me, Ethan blurted, his eyes darting nervously. It was a crow. Some overgrown crow tearing apart your nest. At that, the bull-headed figure froze. A crow. His tone grew colder, harsher. I despise crows more than anything. It snorted, and a rush of white vapor burst from its nostrils. Ethan staggered back. That wasn't just hot breath. It reached him like a blast of icy wind. His body shivered as a chill stabbed into his soul. And that was wrong. In Ethereal, the game never simulated true temperature. There was frost damage, sure, but it only ever registered as numbers unless you had resistance buffs. You didn't feel cold. You just lost health. But this cold wasn't in his skin. It was in his bones, in the deepest part of him. Even so, Ethan's panic eased slightly. The monster's reaction had revealed something useful. It really did despise crows. That might be leverage. He forced a smirk. So what if you hate crows? Your home's been shredded to pieces and you didn't even dare crawl out to do anything about it. All you can do is sulk in here like a coward. Inside, his heart hammered. If he pushed too far, maybe this thing would snap and tear him apart. But he had noticed something important. It hadn't left its throne once. Yesterday, when he first stumbled into this place, he'd also noticed something strange. No name, no rank, no level floating above its head. Every monster and spirit in Ethereal carried a marker unless they weren't like the others. Whatever this thing was, it was bound, restrained, different. And that gave Ethan ideas. Young one, the creature growled, its arms slamming down onto the throne's armrest. The sound rang out like iron striking stone. Ethan jerked back, nearly stumbling. But then he saw it. Chains. Thick, short chains fastened tight around its wrist, binding it to the throne itself. The fear in him shifted into something else entirely. Boldness. Ha! That explains it. Throwing a tantrum from your chair because you can't do anything else. Why don't you break free, climb out there, and kill the crow yourself? Or is pounding the armrest all you've got left? His grin widened as realization hit him. This thing wasn't a warden of the hall. It was the prisoner. The monster froze, staring at him with those eyeless, obsidian orbs. When it spoke again, its voice was colder, more arrogant. Do you even know who I am? How dare you address me like this? A prisoner, obviously. Ethan shot back without hesitation. The creature blinked. Then, slowly, it began to laugh. The sound started low, before breaking into wild, echoing laughter that shook the chamber. Clatter. Clang. Its chained arm slammed against the throne again and again. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Yeah, you've definitely lost it. The laughter stopped abruptly. Its voice turned steady, almost regal. My family name is Aldrich. My given name, Crow. 2,000 years ago, the world once called me the Ancestral Dragon. Perhaps you know me by another title. It leaned forward, lowering its tone. First Emperor of the Iron Dominion. Ethan almost choked, recalling a certain folklore. His lips trembled before a laugh burst out of him, uncontrollable. 2,000 years? Aldrich Crow? Ancestral Dragon? What's next? You're gonna tell me you're Aldrich the First himself. Ha 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 ha. Tears blurred his vision as he bent over laughing. But the creature only stared, silent, until it asked in a low, dangerous voice. You recognize me? You are not of this world, are you? You are from Earth. Ethan froze. That word, Earth. The figure rose, iron chains screeching as they stretched taut. Stone dust crumbled from its body, flaking away as cracks spread across its form. Beneath the grime and dirt, a dark metallic light gleamed faintly. Even the horn jutting from its head split and fell, revealing not a demon's skull, but a helm, fashioned with bull horns, ancient and battle-worn. The truth sank into Ethan's gut like a stone. This wasn't just some monster. This might really be Aldrich the First mentioned in those myths and legends everyone thought were nothing but fiction. You're really Aldrich Crow? Ethan stammered. The name surfaced from the depths of half-forgotten history classes. The Crow dynasty, son of Duke Robert and Lady Helena. Folk stories even claimed Aldrich once carried his mother's surname in youth. And now here he was calling himself exactly that. It seems you truly are from Earth, Aldrich said quietly, lowering himself back onto the throne. His gaze drifted away as though staring through time itself. Ethan stood frozen, mind spinning. What was happening? Aldrich the First, the founding emperor of the Iron Dominion, wasn't supposed to be alive. He died millennia ago. So why was he here? And what exactly was this world he spoke of? Was it really just ethereal? What is Earth like now? Aldrich asked suddenly. His voice had shed its earlier arrogance. It was calm, almost wistful. Ethan swallowed. Well, let's see. After you, Earth went through more than 2,000 years of history. Industrial revolutions, global wars, now it's a highly technological civilization. I wasn't asking about your world. I asked about the Iron Dominion. Aldrich cut in sharply. Ethan hesitated. His palms grew damp. Do you really want to know? Speak, Aldrich ordered. All right. History says the Iron Dominion collapsed 6 years after your death. Ethan began carefully, watching for the Emperor's reaction. Aldrich didn't rage as Ethan expected. His expression only darkened. 6 years? Ha! I knew those fools couldn't hold what I built. Ethan pushed on, dredging up what scraps of school history he could. You died in 210 BC. A year later, Gates and Boone launched an uprising. Peasants rallied to them, and the whole empire followed. Marcus Hale and another warlord raised armies against the Dominion. Eventually, it was destroyed, and in 202 BC, a new dynasty was founded by its first emperor, founder Marcus Hale. Gates? Boone? Marcus Hale. Aldrich repeated the names with disdain, leaning back, chin in hand. Never heard of them. Mere ants. To think such nobodies overturned my empire. Ethan stayed silent, his mind racing. At last he blurted, Then, why are you here? History says you died of illness. Died of illness? Aldrich sneered. Ignorant mortals. To believe such drivel. Ethan clenched his fists and waited. The man's eyes glinted with scorn. Do you even know what this throne is? Aldrich asked, his hand trailing along the carved armrest. Ethan looked again. The throne was carved from what seemed like black jade, smooth and polished, but also exaggerated in its ornate design. For all its grandeur, he saw nothing especially mystical about it. And yet, a knot of unease twisted in his chest. Chapter 569. The Emperor Who Defied Death. Ethan studied the throne carefully, his brow furrowed. The stone wasn't ordinary. It had the dark gleam of obsidian, its surface so polished it almost swallowed the light. The texture seemed familiar, as if he had seen it once before, but the memory slipped through his grasp. In the end, he shook his head. Then tell me, Aldrich's voice broke the silence, steady yet carrying the weight of centuries. Do you know why I despise crows? Crows? Ethan echoed, considering the strange question. He searched through the fragments of history he carried in his mind. Long ago, during the Spring and Autumn and Warring States eras, the intellectual boom of the great concord of philosophers had shaped destiny. Confucians, legalists, pathfinders, the pragmatists, the twin balance order, and the war scholars had fought with words and ideas, not just steel. Yet Aldrich had risen from all that chaos to unify the land, and with unification came his obsession with conquering death itself. The emperor had conscripted arcanists, mystics, and warlocks from every corner of the empire, forcing them to pursue an elixir of immortality. He poured out wealth and manpower like water, building ships, temples, and laboratories dedicated to that single goal. In 219 BC, he had even spent 3 months adrift on the seas off the Blackridge Peninsula, hunting for the legendary Isles of the Immortals, Isle of Dawn, Cragspire, and Valeholm, where God supposedly kept the secret to eternal life. The man who had led him on this pursuit was Silas Marrow, a magician and alchemist. Silas claimed he had seen the immortal mountains with his own eyes and swore he would return with the elixir of life. But there was another story. A folk legend whispered that after Aldrich first unified the lands, he had heard of a crow that carried resurrection on its back. Soldiers had seen it. A crow perching upon a corpse, a plant dropping from its feathers, and the dead rising once more. Word of it had traveled up the chain of command until it reached the emperor himself. He had believed the crow came from an immortal island, and from that day forward his obsession had only deepened. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Could that be the reason? Could Aldrich hate crows because of this legend? He recounted the tale cautiously, and sure enough, the emperor's expression shifted. The crow, Aldrich said with venom. Was Silas Marrow transformed? Ethan didn't flinch. After everything he had experienced since his rebirth, a sorcerer transforming into a crow was hardly beyond belief. Then it's true, Ethan pressed. Silas Marrow really took 3,000 boys and girls to the Eastern Isles? The emperor tilted his head back, his gaze drifting to the vaulted dome above as though peering across centuries. Yes, he left with them. He never returned. Not at first. 5 years later, he came back, but only I saw him. Aldrich's voice grew bitter, shadowed with hatred. And he didn't bring back the elixir, did he? Ethan asked. History itself supported the suspicion. Records said Silas had returned with nothing but excuses, claiming the immortals demanded greater tribute, more young lives, before parting with their secrets. He had departed once more, never to be seen again. Aldrich had waited for years, finally realizing he had been deceived. The emperor had not given up, though. In 215 BC he met 2 more mystics, Lucian Gray and Hugh Rowan, who promised him guidance. They presented him with a so-called Codex of the Path, claiming it contained secrets of the ethereal way. Within was a single ominous line. The one who will end Aldrich comes from the House of Hallow. Terrified, Aldrich unleashed his armies upon the northern tribes, desperate to snuff out any threat. On their advice, he hid his movements from everyone, living in shifting secrecy among palaces, constructing tunnels and hidden corridors so no assassin, or perhaps no fate itself, could find him. But as the years passed and his paranoia deepened, suspicion turned to tyranny. When Lucian Gray and Hugh Rowan finally fled, his wrath consumed not only them but all scholars he mistrusted, culminating in the infamous purge of scrolls and sages. Ethan listened, trying to reconcile the man before him with the tyrant of history. No, Aldrich said suddenly, his tone dropping to a growl. He did bring something back. That night, he came to me in secret, without the drums or curtains warning of his presence. He appeared by my bed, told me Lucian Gray and Hugh Rowan were frauds, and gave me a pill. Take this before your final breath, he said, and you will rise again, reborn into eternity. Then, before my eyes, he transformed into a crow and flew into the night. The emperor's voice trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of memory. Ethan's pulse quickened. History had never recorded this. When Ethan asked about the burning of books, Aldrich only laughed, a thunderous sound that shook the chamber. Purge of scrolls and sages? Do you think the world knows the truth of what I destroyed? His eyes burned with manic pride. I buried not scholars, but false magicians. I burned not the wisdom of the ages, but 3 lies dressed as sacred texts. The first was the Book of Documents, recording the so-called Sage Kings. Tell me which of them achieved what I achieved. I ended centuries of war. I forged peace across the land. My empire was the pinnacle of civilization. Why should I let the words of dead kings dictate to me? I honored the present and burned the past. Ethan had no answer. The man's defiance was not aimed at him but at heaven itself. The second book was the classic of poetry, Aldrich continued, his voice sharp. A work that mocked me while praising the rulers before me. And the third, the Codex of the Path, the so-called Scripture of Immortality, beloved by arcanist frauds. I burned it, buried its followers, and erased their deceptions from this world. Ethan knew then that Aldrich was not speaking of the Treatise of the Path written by Zoran the Ancient, but of a different book entirely, a lost scripture whispered of in legends, one that contained genuine methods of energy mastery. Only a few words remained, carved into history like a riddle. The human heart is perilous. The path heart is subtle. The peril and the subtle are entwined. Only the enlightened understand. It dawned on Ethan that Aldrich's fury against the mystics had not been simple cruelty, but vengeance against betrayal. At last Ethan exhaled. You've told me your story, Emperor. But you still haven't explained where did this throne come from? And why are you chained to it like a prisoner? Aldrich's eyes blazed. He lifted one hand and struck the armrest with a resounding clap. This throne, he declared, I seized from the underworld itself. It once belonged to the Lord of the Dead. It holds power beyond comprehension. Ethan froze. The Lord of the Underworld's throne? His stomach turned cold. That wasn't just any throne. If Aldrich spoke the truth, then the throne of the Underworld belonged to his mother. Chapter 570. Chains upon the throne. Ethan's gaze fixed on the throne, his eyes sharpening as realization struck. That damned Aldrich the First, he had stolen something from Ethan's mother. No wonder the throne had felt so familiar when he first encountered it. The texture was identical to the obsidian pendant his mother had once given him. Later, that same jade had abandoned him, embedding itself in Lila's chest where it fused with her very being. Though Ethan could no longer see it, Lila swore that the pendant had transformed into a milky white stone, merging seamlessly with her skin. His mother had once hinted that the pendant had found its true owner, though she had never elaborated. Ethan hadn't pressed her. Anything from his mother couldn't possibly harm Lila. But now, staring at the chained figure on the throne, the truth gnawed at him. Aldrich the First's voice rumbled through the hall, dragging Ethan back to the present. After the purge of scrolls, my body began to fail, sometime around what you call 210 BC. That was the beginning of my imprisonment here. From Aldrich's words, Ethan pieced the story together. The Emperor hadn't gained resurrection or eternal life from the elixir. Instead, he had been dragged into the underworld, where he wielded terrifying, reality-defying power. Even Aldrich himself wasn't certain whether the elixir had caused this. But then he spoke of his encounter with a crow. The creature claimed to be Silas Marrow's fellow disciple. According to it, the elixir wasn't merely medicine, but a divine concoction capable of preserving Aldrich's soul and awakening his sealed heritage. Aldrich was the ancestral dragon reborn, yet his power had been shackled by the absent lord of the underworld during his descent. The crow explained that this realm was the final destination for countless worlds, its throne holding dominion over all cycles of reincarnation. Once Aldrich realized the scope of such authority, his ambitions soared. What was unifying the Iron Dominion compared to ruling the very flow of life and death? The crow added that the underworld had been without a ruler for an age. The lord had vanished, leaving the throne vacant. To Aldrich, it seemed destiny itself had chosen him. Flattered and emboldened by the crow's words, he marched into the throne hall and claimed the empty seat as his own. But the moment he settled upon it, 3 figures appeared, 2 men and a projection. Ethan already guessed the identities of the first 2, Silas Marrow and the mysterious second disciple. As for the projection, he suspected it was the crow itself, but Aldrich quickly shattered that assumption. The projection called itself Amaterasu, leader of some cult of crows. It demanded I kneel and obey. Naturally, Aldrich refused. History had recorded his pride well enough. Yet, with a single gesture, Amaterasu conjured 4 serpents from his limbs. They coiled around his arms and legs, hardened into chains, and fused with the throne itself. No matter how he raged, Aldrich's supreme power could not break them. Amaterasu tried again to demand his obedience, this time unveiling the cult's doctrine. They worshipped something they called the Crow God, a being who had calculated everything. The Lord's absence, the precise moment of Aldrich's death, and even the restoration of his ancestral dragon bloodline in the underworld. The elixir Aldrich had taken had been prepared under this god's command. Its key ingredient, a sliver of powdered obsidian jade, was what bound the chains to the throne. The crow god's intentions were clear. Aldrich's ancestral dragon essence was the only force capable of countering the throne's freezing abyss, making him the perfect vessel to occupy it. But just as Amaterasu prepared to break him, the throne erupted with a burst of shadowed light. Aldrich lost consciousness, and when he came to, he found himself here, locked in this general's hall where he had remained for 2,000 years. Through the entire tale, Ethan's thoughts circled back to one glaring absence. His mother. If Aldrich had never met her, then perhaps she truly was the missing lord of the underworld. Otherwise, the tyrant could never have sat upon that throne unchallenged. The larger picture unsettled him even more. The Crow God's machinations stretched across worlds, manipulating emperors and disciples alike, all for a single goal: to seize the underworld and ascend to godhood. "Then there's something you should know," Ethan said at last, his voice edged with resolve. "The crow you mentioned, he isn't just a lackey. He is the Crow God himself. His name is Anzu." He fixed his stare on Aldrich, waiting for fury, or shock, or denial. Instead, the Emperor only looked at him with unnerving calm. Ethan frowned inwardly. Has 2 millennia of chains truly dulled his fire? Aldrich chuckled dryly. "Boy, you came here because he chased you, didn't you?" Ethan rubbed the bridge of his nose, sheepish. "Well, yeah, that damned crow wouldn't stop until I ended up here." The Emperor tilted his head. "And now you're hoping to use me against him? Let me fight him while you reap the spoils." "What? Of course not." Ethan grinned, masking his nerves with bravado. "You couldn't even handle Amaterasu. How would you deal with Anzu himself?" To his surprise, Aldrich only nodded. "You're right. If that old crow descends in person, neither of us will see another dawn." His composure was unsettling. Was this really the same tyrant who once drowned nations in blood? Aldrich raised his chained arm, the metal links rattling. "If I could leave this place, boy, do you think I'd have sat here for 2,000 years? I'd have torn that crow from the sky and boiled him alive." Ethan winced at the sound of the clanking chains. The truth was obvious: if Aldrich could break them, he already would have. "Damn it! If I don't deal with Anzu outside, I'll never escape this world. If only I could summon the Twilight War Spear, its edge could slice through these chains. But this place suppresses everything. I tried to call it when I first arrived, but nothing answered. My mindscape is cut off here. The spear's true form can't cross into this world." His frustration boiled until a soft, familiar voice chimed in his mind. "Master, Luna is here." Ethan froze. That voice, clear, childlike, and sweet, resonated from within his very soul. "What?" His eyes widened. At once, he pushed his soul power inward, probing his mindscape. This time, it worked. He could feel it even project his soul power outward. He lifted his hand, then suddenly remembered. He had entered this hall after leaping into the General's token portal while still in panther form. Yet when he emerged here, he had returned to human form. If his transformation remained active, then had his body somehow crossed again when he passed through the portal? The thought unsettled him, but it also opened possibilities he hadn't considered before. Chapter 571. The Ill Omen of the Mercer Needles. Ethan, slow to realize, had no idea that as he stepped through the portal, Lila remained behind, watching his body vanish before her eyes. The weariness weighing on her shoulders lifted slightly. At least he would no longer suffer from the gnawing hunger and weakness that came with spending so long inside the capsule. After days of keeping vigil in Ethan's room, Lila finally forced herself to rise. She lingered on the VR chamber, gazing at it with a faint pout that was equal parts irritation and affection, before turning and walking out of the star chamber. She had only just reached the doorway when she collided with someone. "Oh, my! Sister Lila. I'm so sorry." Lila frowned at the flustered young girl before her, studying her for a moment before asking, "And you are?" The girl was one of the quadruplets. Since arriving, they had all been dressed in the blue-colored uniforms of the modern city, but with how often the sisters traded outfits, it was nearly impossible to tell them apart. "I'm Mia," the girl blurted, panic flickering in her voice. Lila's exhaustion bled into her tone as she asked, "What's wrong? Why are you in such a rush?" "The young master's friend has returned." Lila's expression tightened. Leo? She hadn't thought much about him these past days. Victor had mentioned his disappearance once, but no one had pressed the matter again. His return should be good news. "Why do you look as if the sky is falling?" Mia's lips trembled. He's badly hurt. Dragon Child and Evelyn, even that old doctor, they all say he won't make it. Crystal told me to find out when the young master would come out of the capsule." "What?" Lila's heart sank. She knew too well how much Leo meant to Ethan. In Ethan's previous life, before his rebirth, Leo had been the one constant presence at his side, the friend who had cared for him when he was broken and powerless. Without Leo, Ethan might never have left Harmony City alive. Take me to him. Now. But the young master. Mia glanced nervously toward the capsule. He's fine, Lila said with a weary sigh. He won't be back anytime soon. Mia's shoulders slumped with disappointment. They're all at Matriarch Whitmore's estate. Together they hurried through the ancestral grounds, where Lila found the courtyard crowded. Anxiety and grief clouded every face. From inside the hall came the rough bark of a man's voice. Stop wasting your strength. This boy's already gone. Evelyn. The Mercer 13 needles I taught you are meant to save the living, not stab at corpses. Lila's jaw clenched. She recognized the voice at once. Dr. Aldrich. Fury surged through her as she strode into the hall. There, she found the old man yanking at Evelyn's arm while the girl, pale and desperate, fought to keep working on Leo's motionless body. Leroy! Ryan! Evelyn cried. The two men in the courtyard rushed in at once, brushing past Lila. What are you waiting for? Evelyn snapped at them, eyes blazing. Are you waiting until Ethan himself comes back to blame you? They understood without another word. Both glanced at Leo, who lay on the wooden plank, then turned to Aldrich. Forgive us, Master, Ryan muttered. We're sorry, Master, Leroy echoed. Then the two grabbed hold of Aldrich, wrenching his arms back and dragging him toward the door. You fools! You'll kill Evelyn, Aldrich roared, thrashing against their grip. Do you even remember how her parents died? The words froze the room. Even Dragonchild, who had been weaving her water spells over Leo's body, faltered. Aldrich seemed to realize too late what he had revealed. He fell silent, his struggle stilled. What did you just say? Evelyn's voice trembled as she stepped forward. Grandfather. You told me my parents were only missing. Her wide eyes turned toward Leroy and Ryan. The two older men lowered their gazes, guilt clear in their silence. You knew too, she whispered. For over a decade, they had hidden the truth from her. Evelyn's chest tightened with betrayal. She turned her pleading gaze to Leroy. Brother. Tell me. He met her eyes for only a moment before sighing and lowering his head again, unable to speak. Evelyn's throat tightened as she turned to Ryan. Ryan. He winced under her look. Evelyn, I was only 5 at the time. You were 3. All I remember are 2 words. Ill omen. At that, his eyes flicked toward Aldrich. Everyone followed his gaze. The old man sagged, defeated. So be it. Since the truth has already come out. He gestured, and Leroy and Ryan released him. 20 years ago, your mother and father saved a man. He was like this boy now, half dead, clinging to a single breath. Your mother, reckless as ever, ignored my warnings and forced the needles into him. She saved the man's life, but in doing so, she and your father drew down a terrible burden upon themselves. What kind of burden? Evelyn demanded. Aldrich's face hardened. This is the greatest secret of the Mercer needles. To use them on the dead is forbidden. It is also their greatest power, the power to cheat death itself, to pull a soul back from the grasp of the underworld. Your mother's skill was not strong enough then, so your father poured his own strength into the attempt. Together they succeeded, and together they invoked the omen. An ill omen that no one can escape. The words fell like stones in the silence. Snatching someone from the jaws of death? To the others it sounded like a tale out of myth. But the grief in Aldrich's face was too raw to be a fabrication. At first nothing seemed wrong, he went on. The year after, they even had you. But 5 years later they brought you to me, and the moment I saw them I knew. The omen had come. His voice broke. Tears streaked down his face as he sank into a chair and closed his eyes, unwilling to go further. What was it? Evelyn pressed, her voice sharp with desperation. Leroy answered in a low, steady voice. When we buried them, their bodies had already changed. Only hours after death, gray hair covered them from head to toe. And while they still breathed, scales had begun to spread across their skin. A horrified silence filled the hall. So that's how Sister Eva and Brother Leonard died. The words came not from within the room, but from above. An unfamiliar voice drifted down from the rooftop. Aldrich's eyes snapped open. Chapter 572. 11 Needles at Whitmore Hall. A voice, thin and unexpectedly calm, drifted down from the rafters of the Whitmore family's main hall, and the whole room snapped into silence. Conversation died at once. 3 figures moved without hesitation. Uncle Jed, Blackie, and Julian, each a presence that made people step back. Matriarch Whitmore rose from her chair, a cold light in her eyes. No one could say when the newcomer had slipped in one moment the rafters were empty. The next a shadow had announced itself. Julian's fingertips trembled with barely concealed power, the kind that promised a lethal end if the man overhead was an enemy. Tension held the hall like a held breath, every head tilted up, every muscle ready. Then Aunt Melinda, a beat slower than most but steady, broke the hush. "Don't move, it's Brother Starfall," she said. The name eased the air immediately. They felt no hostility in the voice from above. Someone dropped down with the ease of habit, landing lightly as if he had done it all his life. Matriarch Whitmore could not help the sharp, amused rebuke that followed. "Starfall, still hanging out on rafters. Didn't you get your fill of that as a child? Is your backside restless again?" she asked as she sat back, half scolding, half fond. The man who had just stepped off the beams smiled and rubbed the bridge of his nose in a way that made Lila catch her breath. There was a trace of Ethan in him enough to make her pause. Starfall had once looked fractured and terrifying in the Silverwood family's territory, almost like a revenant wrapped in arrogance. Now he seemed ordinary, steady, even a little like Julian in his calm about him. Before Starfall could get a sentence out, the air filled with a strange metallic whisper. Whistles and tiny chimes, close and sharp, made everyone snap their heads. Starfall made a small questioning sound. A cluster of crisp metallic clicks came from his lapel and all eyes went to it. 11 slender needles gleamed there, set into the fabric like so many tiny warnings. "Grandfather." The word was half a gasp. "Dr. Aldrich." Murmurs named him as all attention turned toward the origin of the attack. Dr. Aldrich stood as if he had just finished launching something, hatred carved into his face. "You killed my daughter and son-in-law," he said, voice raw. "I want your life." Starfall did not answer with anger. He only observed, almost kindly. "After all these years you still rely on 11 needles. Compared to Sister Eva, your talent is still lacking." Nothing in his tone tried to wound. He stated the fact as if reminding an old man of a failed habit. The words hit Dr. Aldrich like a prod. He snarled and then, with the speed of a practiced hand, produced a scalpel that gleamed black and silver between his fingers. It sang through the air toward Starfall's throat. There was a horrible, screeching sound, metal against something harder, and everyone flinched. Blackie moved as if pulled by a wire. He lunged forward to stand in front of Starfall, a coiled, dangerous thing. At the same instant, the scalpel's edge found only a barely visible white mark on Starfall's skin. The blade came away blunted, and a small blue sphere of crackling light appeared in Starfall's palm, humming with electric tension and curving straight toward Dr. Aldrich. It was clear to everyone that the orb carried Blackie's signature force, as though Blackie had sent the energy and Starfall had shaped it, or had seized it and redirected it himself. Micah stepped in, alarm ringing in his voice. "What is going on? This is getting out of hand. Blackie, come back now. Why are you getting involved?" He reached out as if to restrain him. Blackie ignored the hand and fixed his stare on Dr. Aldrich like a man who could remember 1,000 hurts. The situation suddenly felt older and more private than the Whitmore family had any right to witness. Then Evelyn moved with a quiet command, intercepting the space between Blackie and the old doctor. "Try touching my grandfather," she said, placing herself where a blow would have to pass through her. Her voice was small but it carried, and it kept Blackie from pressing forward. Blackie's back was to them. He heard a name said softly behind him, and it landed on him like a shiver. "Reese," Starfall said, an incredulous warmth threading the name. Blackie stiffened, then slowly turned. Something in the way Starfall said it, in the look he wore, peeled back time for Blackie. His eyes filled with tears he had not expected to shed. It's me," he managed, voice breaking. Everyone fell silent. The Whitmores and their guests had known Blackie as the mysterious being Ethan had brought from another world. They had called him the Black Chelan in whispers. They had not expected him to answer to a human name, let alone Reese. The name now suggested a history that had been deliberately left out of the public lineages. Starfall grabbed him by the shoulders with an almost boyish relief. "It really is you. How did you end up here? Did father bring you? Where is my father now?" he asked, rushing the questions like someone pouring out years of missing pages. Blackie's face tightened at how often the word father tumbled from Starfall's mouth, because the man who had brought him here was not the same as the father Starfall seemed to mean. He told his brief account haltingly, the explanation a puzzle whose pieces only certain people in the room could read. "After you left, I stayed with Master Overlord for 3 years and then he disappeared. I returned to my clan," he said. The name Master Overlord, spoken aloud, made a few people go very still. Overlord Selim had been a force in a world of family powers, the kind of man who had once governed the 8 noble houses and stood as something outside them at the same time. The Selim line had its own rules, its own secrecy. Hearing those names in Whitmore Hall made the air taste like distant storms and old oaths. Starfall blinked. "How did you make it here then?" he asked. Blackie looked around. glancing at the faces assembled as though checking for a shared memory, and then said, "If I am right, your son brought us here." The words landed like a stone in quiet water. Matriarch Whitmore and Aunt Melody exchanged looks that carried more meaning than either of them said aloud. The thought that Ethan might be connected to the Selim line was a dangerous one. Matriarch Whitmore finally spoke, cautious and precise. "You may be mistaken. I once sparred with Ethan, and there was no trace of Selim bloodline power in him." Starfall either did not hear or paid no attention. "Ethan?" he said, as if that name rekindled a dozen memories. He looked at Blackie with renewed interest. Blackie nodded and then, as if he had been waiting for permission to say this out loud, added a small, sharp memory. "His name. I remember the naming because when Sister June was pregnant, Master Overlord named him. You and Sister June didn't quite like it and wanted to change it. But Master said, his name is Overlord, which sounds dominant, yet there is always a heaven above him. Your name is Starfall, but in the scope of the universe you are only a speck. The child named Ethan is meant to be light, nature, freedom, purity, supremacy, the will of the ethereal." Blackie spoke with something like reverence, memory sharpening the meaning of each syllable. The hall took in the implication in silence. If Overlord Selim had any connection to Ethan, then the threads that bound distant houses and secret heirs were tighter than anyone had believed. It began to explain, in fragments, why figures from distant places had drifted together into this one hall, why names that sounded archaic and powerful had reappeared at the edge of the Whitmore territory. Before anyone could unpack the consequences, a voice cut across the unfolding family drama with all the bluntness of someone who had neither time nor patience for genealogy. "Can you two stop chatting? Someone is about to die here," Dragonchild said, and instantly the threat that had gathered them all snapped back to the forefront of the room. Chapter 573. The message carved in flesh. Dragonchild's tone was sharp and impatient. The others had been so engrossed in their chatter that they seemed to forget she was still crouched beside Leo, pouring her strength into water-based healing magic just to keep him breathing. The man had been mauled beyond recognition. More than 30 wounds carved into his flesh, each one a grotesque reminder of whoever had attacked him. It was a miracle he was still alive. Earlier that day, the Whitmore family had felt a tremor ripple through the sealed entrance to their hidden territory. Someone had forced it open from the outside. Markham had rushed there first, assuming the missing Leo had finally returned on his own. But when they arrived, they found him collapsed inside the territory itself. Unconscious, mangled, and barely clinging to life. They carried him in panic to the ancestral hall. No one expected that Leo wasn't the only outsider who had entered. Starfall, who as a child had once lived here under the care of Overlord Selim, had also found his way back. And he, unlike anyone else, knew how to unseal the gate. "Don't worry. He won't die," Starfall said calmly, glancing at Leo after Dragonchild snapped at the others. "Won't die? Do you even know how he was hurt?" Victor demanded, his voice edged with disbelief. "I don't know who injured him," Starfall admitted. "But I'm the one who brought him here." Victor stepped forward, trying to control his agitation. "Then, sir, may I ask, where did you find him?" "In Ember City." The hall grew quiet as Starfall recounted the story. After parting ways with them previously, he had returned to the ancient tomb from which he had first emerged. There, he stabilized the rotting aura that had been eating away at him and achieved progress beyond anything he had known before. His sanity gradually returned. His first thought was to piece together what had truly happened all those years ago. From the Whitmore family, he learned of his capture and what followed. A woman, June, his wife, had slaughtered every member of the noble 8 lineages who had dared act against him. The deaths had been brutal, every one of them inflicted with methods so vicious that even hardened elders had shuddered. Yet in his memory, June had been nothing more than an ordinary woman with no power to wield. Driven by disbelief, he began visiting the other families one by one, sparing only the Silverwoods and Whitmores. Each confirmed the tale. Their former patriarchs had indeed been slaughtered by a woman who called herself June. For years they had hunted her down, but she had vanished without a trace. 20 years had passed, and all their methods had turned up nothing. Starfall knew his own strength was not enough to find her. But if he could not find his wife, he still had hope in their son. He reasoned that June must have hidden the boy somewhere safe, otherwise the 8 lineages would have discovered him long ago. None of them had even hinted at the existence of a child. So he began with the name Ethan. Searching Ember City, he focused on adopted children and orphans named Ethan. In the end, one stood out. Ethan of Northeast University, an orphan raised in an institution, his age and history aligning too closely to be coincidence. Following the trail, Starfall discovered the villa where Ethan lived with Lila Silverwood. The deed bore her name. The instant he confirmed her identity, a memory stirred. Years ago, at the Silverwood estate, he had seen a young man at Lila's side. At that time his mind had been clouded, so he dismissed the strange sense of familiarity. But now he wondered, could fate really be that deliberate? Just as he prepared to sneak inside and uncover the truth, he felt a faint, dying aura in the courtyard. Approaching, he found Leo sprawled on the grass, soaked in blood, his breathing shallow. Turning him over, Starfall discovered 2 words carved into his chest. The first was legible, "Beware." The second was incomplete, as if etched in a trembling hand. The half-formed word looked like, "then." Starfall could not shake the thought that Leo had dragged himself here deliberately, intent on delivering one final warning to Ethan. The thought unsettled him. Nevertheless, he carried Leo away, intending to take him to the Silverwood estate. At the last moment, though, he diverted to the Whitmore family, remembering Markham's bond with the youth he suspected to be Ethan. To his surprise, upon entering the hidden territory, he found not chaos but peace, the halls alive with powerful guests. Stranger still, 2 new villas had risen within the territory as if they had always been there. Evelyn broke his narrative with a sharp voice. "No, this doesn't add up. You said when you found him he was barely alive. Do you realize how far Ember City is from here? He's still at death's door even now. I examined him. He's had no treatment at all." Starfall chuckled, his tone mocking. "Ha! The daughter of Eva truly is impressive, but you're missing the point. Am I wrong, Dr. Aldrich?" His eyes shifted to the old man seated nearby. Evelyn turned quickly. "Grandfather? What does he mean?" Dr. Aldrich snorted. "Oh, now I'm grandfather. Am I? Didn't you just order your brothers to drag me away not long ago?" Evelyn pouted, her cheeks coloring. "Father. You still bring that up at a time like this?" The old man sighed, his expression softening. "Enough. The boy won't die. When have you ever seen me turn away from saving a life? I only stopped you earlier because I feared you'd follow your mother's reckless path. Now, check his heart carefully." Evelyn obeyed and moved closer to Leo. Before she could finish her inspection, Dragon Child spoke up, her face pale from the strain of her healing. "I already checked. His heart stopped beating long ago. But there's another power lodged inside it. Something I've been suppressing." When Evelyn extended her own energy to probe, her eyes widened. Ghastly aura. Her voice trembled, and the hall itself seemed to grow colder. Ryan's face darkened as he rounded on Starfall. "Are you trying to turn him into an undead?" Starfall only shrugged. "He's already dead. What else did you expect me to do, drag in a rotting corpse? Besides, if that little girl keeps suppressing the aura I planted, then yes, he really will die." Dragonchild hesitated, glancing at Lila, Victor, and Williams. Lila and Victor both nodded slowly. Williams said nothing, though his gaze was fixed grimly on Leo. At last, Dragonchild drew her hand away. She let out a long breath, her eyes narrowing at Starfall. "I'm 19,872 years old. Not some little girl, like you keep calling me." The statement left Lila flustered, tugging Dragonchild aside. "Why are you dragging me? You're his daughter-in-law, not me. And for the record, I despise being called a little girl." Dragonchild crossed her arms, her voice sharp. I. Lila stammered, her face red as she glanced back at Starfall, then turned away abruptly, glaring daggers at Dragonchild instead. Starfall's gaze lingered on Lila, thoughtful and intrigued. She stiffened under his eyes, forcing herself to turn away as if nothing had happened. "Uncle Starfall," Victor suddenly called out, half to break the tension, half in amusement. Everyone turned, watching Lila and Starfall with knowing smiles. Meanwhile, Ethan remained completely unaware of the turmoil unfolding in the real world. In the boundless ethereal world, he gripped the Twilight War spear tightly, its metallic song ringing through the vast hall of the generals. The echoes were so loud, one might mistake the chamber for a blacksmith's forge. Chapter 574. The Breaking of the Chains. "Come on, kid. Put some muscle into it. Yes, that's it. A crack. Push harder, and I'll reward you with 1,000 pieces of gold and beauties." The clanging echoes rang through the general's hall, accompanied by the slightly giddy voice of Aldrich I and the sound of ragged, heavy-breathing huff, like some overworked hound about to collapse. Who else could it be but Ethan? For all the awe-inspiring aura he had carried at first, the aloof, tyrant-king air of a man who once ruled the world, Aldrich I was proving himself very different when confronted with the chance of freedom. His calm facade had cracked, and in its place, an almost childlike zeal had emerged. Ethan couldn't help smirking. "Your Majesty, stop making promises you can't keep. You're broke and chained up like a wolf in a cage. 1,000 pieces of gold? Beauties? What beauties could your time have even offered? If you really manage to break out of here and take down that crow, then I'll show you what real beauties look like. Beneath the battered helmet, Aldrich's eyes flickered faintly, though Ethan didn't notice. What neither of them realized was that Ethan was already whispering through his mind to Yaya, weaving their plan behind the first Emperor's back. "This chain's nearly done," Aldrich declared suddenly, his voice firm. "Make the same cracks in the other 3, and I'll break free." Yeah, Ethan muttered. He wiped the sweat from his brow, then flopped down onto the ground with a grunt. "I'm too tired. Need a breather." He lay back flat, digging a piece of dried meat from his spatial storage and biting down. Kid, what are you eating? Let me have a taste." Aldrich's eyes twitched, his nose flaring as if he could smell through the centuries. "This?" Ethan shot him a look and shook his head. "Not happening. I don't have much left myself, and I need the energy to keep working. You haven't eaten in over 2,000 years. It'd just be wasted on you." Aldrich narrowed his eyes, but then nodded slowly, a faint glint flashing across his gaze. "Fair enough. Then hurry up and recover your strength." Ethan ignored him, still chewing. After a while, he pulled out a small white bottle, uncorked it, and took a swig. A rich, fragrant aroma immediately filled the hall. This time, Aldrich couldn't keep calm. His head jerked up, his nostrils twitching. "Good wine. Of course it's good wine," Ethan replied through a mouthful of meat, tipping the bottle again. "This is 60 years old. A white bottle vintage. Top shelf stuff." "White bottle?" Aldrich asked, and for a moment, if not for the dust and stone crusted across him like some ancient statue, it almost looked as if he might blush. "Do you have another?" "I've got one more," Ethan admitted, pulling a second bottle into view. His expression tightened, as though the thought of sharing cut him deeply. "But fine. Since fate threw us together, I'll share." He rose reluctantly and held the unopened bottle out toward Aldrich. The first Emperor stared at it, then suddenly barked. "Since you don't have much, give me the half-empty one instead." His shackled hand shot out. "What? This is my leftover," Ethan exclaimed. "You're Aldrich the First, and I'm just a descendant. How could I insult you with my scraps?" "Bah! I'm no longer the first Emperor," Aldrich snapped, and with a speed that should have been impossible for someone bound. He snatched the half-finished bottle right out of Ethan's hand. Ethan's timing had been just wrong enough that the bottle fell neatly into Aldrich's reach. The first Emperor lifted the wine, sniffed, and then turned his gaze up at Ethan, who was grinning wide and innocent. "To share fine wine with Aldrich the First. I have no regrets in this life," Ethan declared theatrically, twisting open his other bottle and taking a swig. Aldrich watched him drink, a flicker of suspicion flashing in his eyes. He sipped his own bottle cautiously, savoring it as though searching for poison. Ethan caught the look out of the corner of his eye and thought grimly, "He really doesn't trust me. Probably thinks I slipped something in the wine." But he said nothing. Instead, he downed more liquor, stuffed the rest of the dried meat in his mouth, and hauled up the Twilight War Spear once again, resuming his work on the chains binding Aldrich's other limbs. Time crawled by. It took 2 full days before Ethan finally pried open the last gap in the chain binding Aldrich's right arm. And since time in this world flowed at the same pace as back on Earth, that meant 9 days had already passed. By now, the Fortress Wars expansion for Ethereal should have launched 6 days earlier, but the game had remained under maintenance the entire time. No announcements, no updates, just silence. On Earth, frustration had boiled over. Players stormed Ethereal's retail stores and corporate branches. Trouble at the stores ended with police dragging people away. At the offices, they found nothing but advanced AI robots, and troublemakers there were quietly escorted out as well. Complaints flooded into consumer protection agencies but went nowhere. Across the globe, people began to realize that Aeon Corporation wasn't just another company. It was untouchable, a titan beyond accountability. But here, in the General's Hall, the critical moment had arrived. Ethan stood back, heart pounding, as Aldrich slowly rose to his full height. The 4 chains stretched taut, groaning, grinding against ancient stone. "Ah!" Aldrich roared, his voice shaking the hall like an earthquake. Only the black throne of the underworld remained unmoved. Power flooded from him, an aura so heavy it pressed on Ethan's chest, threatening to crush him outright. Then, snap! The chain on Aldrich's right arm shattered. The moment it broke, his aura spiked, a shockwave exploding outward. Ethan gritted his teeth and braced behind the Twilight War Spear, but the concussive blast slammed into him and hurled him backward until his spine hit the far wall. "Goddammit! He's too strong," Ethan coughed, steadying himself. "Yaya, you're sure our plan will work?" "It should be fine," Yaya's gentle voice answered in his mind. Ethan swallowed hard. "I feel like Maybe I shouldn't have let him out. Don't worry, brother, she reassured him. This is an opportunity. Ethan gave a stiff nod, falling silent, though doubt gnawed in his gut. Chapter 575. The Imperial Aura Awakens. Bang, bang, bang. 3 thunderous blasts ripped through the general's hall. Ha 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 ha. I am free, Aldrich the First roared, his laughter booming until it seemed to shake the heavens themselves. Ethan, watching from a distance, could only stare at the man's reborn form. A fierce energy burst from Aldrich's body, raw, blazing battle aura that shimmered around him like a second skin. Ethan raised a hand to shield his eyes. Holy hell! He's gone full Super Saiyan. The aura wasn't just so powerful. It radiated an overwhelming dominance that dwarfed anything Ethan had ever set his eyes on. It wasn't some invisible force sensed only by the gifted. No, this was visible to the naked eye, a golden brilliance rippling and flickering like firelight. Beside him, a voice rang out, firm and certain. Brother, you see it, don't you? That is the ancestral dragon's aura, also known as the Imperial Aura. Only one ancestral dragon can be born on a single world. The birth of such a being demands countless reincarnations, and in every life, they stand above all others. Ethan's eyes narrowed on Aldrich, on the terrible light spilling from him. The ancestral dragon's aura, Imperial Aura, the power of a true emperor, a son of heaven. If that's real, then every emperor since Aldrich has been a fraud, a shadow wearing a stolen crown. Yaya, he asked silently. Are we in the wrong here? Her voice came calm and unshaken. There is no wrong in this. To rise above all others, one must climb a mountain of corpses. Her words steadied him. She was right. Never mind Aldrich's so-called destiny. Just look at what he had wrought. The Iron Dominion crushed nations beneath its heel. Entire peoples had been slaughtered. The purge of scrolls and sages had burned centuries of knowledge into ash. If Ethan borrowed a fragment of this Imperial Aura, was that truly theft? Perhaps it was justice. The thought cleared his doubts. He only had to play along, not reveal his intentions. If Aldrich cooperated, perhaps there'd be no need to seize it outright. Still, Yaya had insisted the aura was unlike any other power. Unlike the energy that sank into his body and vanished like a stone in the sea, this could be wielded directly. It could accelerate the growth of the tree of life within him, maybe even trigger another evolution, and stir the dormant seeds in his core, the nebula swirling inside him, maddeningly out of reach. Most of all, the Imperial Aura carried the power of destiny itself. But destiny? Ethan couldn't help doubting. If Aldrich was truly so favored, then how had he rotted in this tomb for 2,000 years? Kid? Aldrich's voice cut across his thoughts. Fight at my side. We'll face that damned crow together. You'll serve as my backup. Agreed. The aura then withdrew, though a faint shimmer still clung to his form. His eyes burned with arrogance, the same haughty disdain that had once commanded empires. Ethan started, but his refusal was cut off as Aldrich flicked his sleeve. A crushing force wrapped around him, yanking him off his feet. Ethan gritted his teeth, struggling as the golden aura enveloped him. It was dense, like wading through liquid light, yet with effort he felt he could break free. Yaya, he called quickly in his mind. Don't act. Not yet. The aura pressed deeper into him, and heat erupted from within his bones. Focusing inward, Ethan saw a faint glow stirring. 5-colored light flickering inside him, subtle but alive, his quintessence bone. Until now, it had acted only as a passive shield, an unconscious defense. But now, it pulsed with hunger, as though craving Aldrich's aura. So this is the power of the ancestral dragon's aura. It really is something else. The ground trembled. Aldrich shot upward, dragging Ethan with him. With a single deafening crash, the roof of the general's hall split apart. Boom, boom, boom. They ripped through floor after floor of the general's tomb. Creatures swarmed in the shadows. Corpse guard warriors, javelin corpses, abominations Ethan had only ever fought as game monsters. But here, in the flesh, they radiated slaughter and decay so thick it stung his nose. He counted as they rose. By the time they broke into open air, they had passed through 19 levels, 18 beneath the hall itself. Yet the top 3 had already collapsed on their own. That must have been the crow. But where was it now? They hovered in the open sky. Ethan blinked, stunned. Gone was the blackened abyss of the Carnage faction. Here was light, warmth, and color. Birds sang in the canopy of strange trees. Rivers glittered across rolling plains. In the distance, leviathan creatures swam lazily through the sky, crying out like whales. This, Ethan's breath caught. It was like paradise, some untouched Eden. No choking smog like on Earth. No blistering heat like the Sea of Death. Every breath filled his lungs with clean, rich air. Is this the path of ethereal? Morzan had called it a place of exile. Ethan had pictured some nightmarish hellscape. Instead, he had found this. Caw, caw, caw. Kid, so you finally crawled out. The voice rang sharp and mocking from above. Ethan looked up. A purple speck plummeted down from the heavens. Then, abruptly, it stopped the moment it saw Aldrich. Cautious. Smart. A crow that knows how to survive. Humph. Feathered beast. I've finally found you. Aldrich bellowed, vanishing from Ethan's side in a flash of golden light. A thunderous impact cracked through the sky. Ethan squinted upward, then gasped. A figure was tumbling down, faster than a meteor. Aldrich. He streaked past Ethan and plummeted straight back into the yawning hole that led into the general's tomb. What? That fast? Ethan gaped. So weak? No way. A muffled crash rumbled up from below. Above, a guttural caw echoed. Ethan looked up once more to see the Crowleying god, wings thrashing as it reeled backward into the sky. Chapter 576. The Feathered Betrayal. Just as Ethan was caught in the whirlwind, Yaya's startled voice rang out in his mind. Brother, watch out. He's trying to escape. Ethan's stomach dropped. Damn it. He realized in that instant he had been played. Aldrich I had deliberately drawn him into this clash, only to use the momentum of his collision with the Crowleying god to retreat at lightning speed, heading straight back toward the general's hall. Hovering above the ruins, the Crowleying god lingered, its sharp black eyes full of suspicion as it stared at the gaping hole in the tomb. The hesitation said everything. It feared Aldrich. And if Aldrich truly meant to flee, he would not have left such a display of bravado behind. No, his retreat was a calculated feint. With that realization, Ethan launched himself forward. He dove into the abyss below, calling out as his body shot downward like a comet. Travel form, swift flight. Air howled past him, the speed forcing his body into a streak of white. In a heartbeat, the general's hall appeared below, torches still blazing with an unending flame that had burned for more than 2 millennia. It looked like the hall had existed long before Aldrich's imprisonment. Why it was called the General's Hall was a question Ethan shoved aside. Survival came first. I say, Your Majesty, betraying kindness with treachery doesn't suit the great first emperor of the Iron Dominion. Ethan's voice carried across the chamber as he slowed his descent, eyes fixed on the figure below. Aldrich I was circling the Lord of the Underworld's throne, hands itching to move it from its resting place. He looked up with an infuriatingly casual smirk. Oh, you're still alive, Aldrich said. And I didn't betray you. I said I'd help you deal with that crow, didn't I? Didn't I land a punch? Ethan's face darkened. What the hell do you mean, still alive? Do I look like I should be dead to you? I freed you from your chains, Ethan snapped. Where's the 1,000 gold pieces you promised? The women, the treasures. When you die, Aldrich said smoothly, I'll burn them for you. Aldrich Crow, you mother. Ethan roared, pointing a trembling finger at him. You conniving old fraud. For the first time in centuries, someone cursed Aldrich I to his face. The ancient emperor's eyes went crimson with rage, battle aura surging around him like wildfire. You dare insult me, whelp? You shameless, trickster brat. Had I lived longer, my empire would never have fallen to foreign dogs. Ethan only grew louder, hands on his hips, leaning into every word. Foreign dogs? The only dog here is you. 2,000 years of scholars and keyboard warriors have cursed your name, but I'm the first to do it to your face. And let me tell you, it feels fantastic. Aldrich's fists clenched, the marble floor trembling under the force of his rage. He was seconds from tearing Ethan apart when another voice intruded. Ancestral dragon's aura? The throne of the underworld. So it was you. The rasping words rumbled down from the shattered ceiling. Both men looked up. A massive black head thrust into the hall, feathers bristling, eyes gleaming with malice. The Crowleying god and Zoo had arrived. Humph, you damn bird, Aldrich growled. I'll deal with you after I crush this brat. Hold it. Ethan raised his hands. Even revenge has an order, doesn't it? I only insulted you a few times. That overgrown pigeon above your head? He destroyed your empire 2,000 years ago. He raised a cult in your name, warped your descendants, twisted your legacy into ash. And yet you want to kill me first? Are you brain dead? Ethan rattled off the history, voice sharp with challenge. Think about it, Aldrich. Do you really not know the debt this crow owes you? For a moment, the ancient emperor faltered. His killing intent wavered. Ethan sensed Yaya readying to act, but he quickly reined her back. He couldn't afford an all-out clash here. If he fought Aldrich, the Crowleying god would stand back and reap the spoils. He still didn't know the full extent of that monster's power. And if it escaped alive, it would hunt him for the rest of his life. No, the real enemy here was the feathered god. What you said. Is it true? Aldrich finally asked, his aura dimming slightly. True as steel, Ethan said firmly. And let's not forget whose fault this mess was to begin with. You chased immortality, remember? The thousands of boys and girls taken as tribute. Their bloodlines twisted. Their offspring stunted and broken in mind. Bred only for war. You created a people doomed to be devoured. And you know what? Let me show you something. Ethan's soul sense stirred. A simple, modern-looking wristwatch appeared in his hand. Aldrich eyed it with suspicion but, sensing no dangerous energy, let it pass. Ethan slipped it on, tapped the face, and a projection bloomed in the air. The hall filled with flickering light as scenes of countless people appeared. Men and women shouting battle cries, laying down their lives in waves, dying one after another yet never breaking, never surrendering. Their blood stained the earth, but their eyes burned with the fire of freedom. These are your descendants, Ethan said quietly. The children of your iron dominion. They fought and bled for their homeland, their people, their freedom. The one who made them suffer, the one who turned their sacrifice into a cycle of death and oppression, is the feathered beast right above us. Tell me, Aldrich, what do you think should be done about that? The projection faded, silence filling the hall. Ethan lowered his hand, eyes narrowing as he studied the Emperor. The footage, of course, wasn't conjured from thin air. He had tapped Shatterstar to pull history itself into view, crossing millions of light years to Earth. If Morzan could use stolen First Universe technology to fuse the path of Ethereal with reality and create a game like Ethereal, then Ethan could just as easily bend those rules to his will. And he knew something else. Much of what the world believed about Aldrich I was propaganda. His infamy as a tyrant was built by later dynasties, stories rewritten to legitimize their own thrones. The truth was always more complicated. Chapter 577. The Tyrant's Legacy Ignites. Though Aldrich I had made mistakes, he was, by most accounts, a ruler who had been good to his people. To shield the common folk from the excesses of the nobility, he declared a law that shocked the aristocracy. Princes and nobles, their descendants shall be commoners. Even the son of an emperor held no privilege unless he proved himself on the battlefield. Titles were not hereditary, and only those who earned merit through service could claim honor. In Aldrich's dominion, birth alone granted no advantage. He went further still. The Iron Dominion enforced a system of collective responsibility. Officials were not only expected to carry out their duties faithfully, but also to watch each other. If one committed an offense and others failed to report it, every department involved was purged together. Few dared to risk their lives to cover for a colleague. Under Aldrich's reign, the laws were enforced with ruthless precision. Regulations were written for the benefit of the people, and unlike in so many other realms, these laws were actually carried out. Aldrich gave his people not only bread but also the chance to rise higher, to change their lot in life. In all the centuries that followed, only Marcus Hale, born a peasant and risen to power, could rival him in his devotion to the common folk. Yet history is a cruel storyteller. Because of the blunders of his foolish heir, Aldrich II, and the slanders whispered by later generations, Aldrich I became branded a tyrant. When people muttered, "The world has suffered too long," they spoke not of Aldrich I, but of his son. The self-indulgent, pleasure-drunk monarch who squandered the kingdom's loyalty until his people felt they belonged nowhere at all. That sense of alienation was not without cause. The Iron Dominion itself had been forged too swiftly, too violently. Aldrich's armies had conquered countless nations, and many of those newly bound subjects still longed for the lands of their birth. Aldrich's reasoning, however, had been grim but simple. To end endless wars, he would wage a final war of unification. To end war with war. The Serpent Islanders could not have been more different. They made war for war's sake, plundering the mainland only to haul spoils back to their tiny island state. Critics claimed Aldrich's greatest act of tyranny was mobilizing 1,000,000 laborers to build the Iron Dome, that vast barrier of steel and stone that encircled the Dominion. But every dynasty that came after used that dome to shield its borders from invasion. Aldrich's intention had never been oppression, it was protection. A way to ensure that his people might finally live free from the endless bloodshed of raiding neighbors. Without the dome, the thrones of later rulers would have toppled 10, 20, even 100 times faster. Now, standing before Aldrich I's spirit, Ethan showed him a recording of the Empire's army's long struggle, the battles that had birthed the new dominion on the new continent. He hoped to win Aldrich to his side without revealing too much of his own strength. It was for this reason that he had resisted ordering Yaya to trigger the hidden safeguards planted upon Aldrich. For all his scheming, Ethan could not bring himself to see this old monarch as an enemy. In his heart, he felt Aldrich I was still, if not entirely trustworthy, at least a man who had meant well for his people. Silas Marrow, Serpent Islanders, feathered beast. The old man's muttering broke into a growl as he raised his head to glare at the Crowleying god peering in through the shattered ceiling. His voice rumbled with both hatred and pride. Good. First I'll tear apart this crow, then I'll settle accounts with you. His eyes cut toward Ethan, sharp enough to make Ethan's heart lurch. Wait. What accounts with me? Ethan thought, startled. The question had no time for an answer. With a deafening boom, Aldrich stamped the ground. Golden battle energy erupted around him like a blazing storm. Without hesitation, he launched himself upward, rocketing toward the Crowleying god's enormous eye in the ceiling. Feathered beast. Today I'll finish what was left undone, he roared, both fists crashing forward. For the briefest instant, Ethan saw something like shock flash across the god's single eye before it flinched away from the hole above. The entire tomb shuddered with the impact. Dust rained down, and purple light flared through the opening. The Crowleying god had pulled back into the sky, and Aldrich chased him upward without pause. Ethan's lips curled despite himself. The old monarch was fierce beyond belief. Still, Ethan couldn't shake the unease of that last threat Aldrich had thrown at him. His gaze flicked toward the throne of the underworld looming nearby. The thought stirred in him. It belonged to his mother, and it should rightfully be reclaimed. Boy, don't you dare covet it, or I'll return to kill you first. The warning drifted down from above as if Aldrich had plucked the thought straight out of Ethan's mind. Ethan stiffened. Damn, this old man really can read me like a book. Forget it. After the feathered beast falls, I'll deal with Aldrich. The throne will be mine, and I'll return it to Mother as a gift. Resolved, Ethan's body blurred and shot upward. From above, thunderous rumbles echoed. The battle had already begun. When he emerged from the general's tomb, the sight before him was apocalyptic. The serene fields of blossoms and birdsong were gone. Purple fire clouds churned overhead, radiating blistering heat. The ground below lay charred. Every flower and blade of grass withered. High above, two colossal figures, one avian, one human but blazing with power, clashed again and again in the span of heartbeats. Each collision shook the air with roars that seemed to tear the heavens apart. Yet, strangely, the sky itself did not break. On the umbral star, beings of such strength would have ripped holes in the very fabric of space, opening black voids with every strike. Here, the world's shell seemed harder, more unyielding, refusing to fracture even under their fury. Caw, caw, caw. The Crowleying god's voice rolled like thunder. The one I chose long ago indeed wields great strength. But you cannot defeat me. I have followers beyond number. The power of their faith sustains me. What can you, a relic of a minor world, hope to achieve against that? Ethan's eyes widened. He had seen Aldrich punch straight through one of the god's massive wings, leaving feathers scattered like falling blades. Yet, in an instant, the wound had knit together, restored by an unseen force. Faith, it had to be this power of belief the creature boasted of. Could such power truly make it unkillable? Aldrich bellowed in defiance. Then let's see how long that faith lasts you. He hurled himself forward again, a golden storm made flesh. Ethan could only gape at the sheer intensity of his battle aura. He had expected Aldrich to be outmatched, but the old emperor's strength was overwhelming. His blows fueled by raw power and an indomitable will that refused to bend. What kind of power do these two even have? Ethan muttered under his breath, struggling to comprehend the scale of the clash. They're both at the peak of Voidbreaker level. Yaya's voice chimed suddenly in his mind, matter of fact. Voidbreaker peak? Ethan echoed, frowning. And what's beyond Voidbreaker? Yaya's inherited memories aren't fully restored yet, so I don't know, she admitted with a sheepish tone. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Then tell me this. Do you know how strong my mother really is? Ah, that's incomparable, Yaya replied after a pause, her voice growing hesitant. Brother, don't ask. Yaya isn't sure either. Chapter 578. The Emperor's Last Trump Card. Ethan crouched low, a silent spectator to the brutal clash unfolding in the skies above. The two combatants were locked in a relentless dance of violence, each strike shaking the air like thunder. His thoughts, however, wandered. The system had labeled this Crowleying god as pseudo-divine. Beyond that was divine. Did that mean the rank above Voidbreaker was filled with true divine rank powerhouses? He gnawed at the thought, but no answer came. Up above, the fight dragged on. A blur of wings, claws, and fists. Neither side gained the upper hand. On the surface, the Crowleying god seemed to be taking more punishment, yet its dark aura never dimmed. Aldrich the First pressed his assault with ruthless precision, but Ethan could see the cracks in his imperial aura. It was fading by the minute. Caw, caw, caw. Your long imprisonment has drained much of your ancestral dragon's aura. Unlike me, my power of faith never falters. Crack. The Crowleying god never got the chance to finish its gloat. Aldrich's fist connected clean with its jaw, spinning the colossal bird a full circle in the air. Its lower beak snapped like brittle glass. The sight was grotesque, like a man with his jaw torn off, tongue hanging loose and obscene. Too much bluster. Why waste breath? Aldrich's voice cut like steel. Die instead. Words were wasted on him. He was a man of action, and even as his aura waned, he locked onto the Crowleying god and hammered it with merciless blows. Ethan watched and felt an odd calm settle in. This was no game anymore, this was reality. But compared to his arsenal now, compared to the monsters he'd already faced, this felt manageable. A peak Voidbreaker? Hardly worth losing sleep over. He thought back to the Blood Clan fiend he and his mother had fought. That thing's aura had dwarfed both these brawlers, and hadn't he vaporized it with a single shot? The Crowleying god shrieked, its broken jaw knitting back together with an audible crunch. Caw, caw, caw. You insignificant worm, perish. Its arrogance was gone. Aldrich's fists had driven out the mockery. The bird understood now, faith power alone couldn't save it. Ethan smirked and cupped his hands around his mouth. Feathered freak. You're nothing but a glorified pigeon picking fights with mortals. Faith power? Don't make me laugh. Your believers are probably too busy watching soap operas and skipping prayers. The Crowleying god's feathers flared, a wave of violet rage rippling through the clouds. Ethan grinned wider. Oh, touched a nerve, did I? Well, let's fact-check that divine ego of yours. Time to see what your faithful are up to. He tapped his wrist console. A massive holographic screen exploded across the sky, bright enough to blot out the sun. Words scrolled across in bold, glowing letters. Devotion of the Serpent Isles. Unfiltered reality. A split second later, a very different kind of worship filled the air. Gasps, moans, and cries of ecstasy blasted through the battlefield like a stadium speaker caught on the wrong channel. Ethan winced, stuffed in earplugs, then turned the volume up. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what divine faith looks like on a Friday night. Aldrich paused mid-swing, glancing upward in bewilderment. The Crowleying god froze too, its eyes wide with disbelief, reflecting the scandalous light. Don't just stand there gawking, your majesty. Ethan yelled into his mic, voice booming over the unholy chorus. While our bird-brained deity's busy having a crisis of faith, punch it in the beak. He strutted beneath the flickering glow, arms wide like a sports announcer. Behold, the proud worshippers of the great Enzu, saints of self-control, paragons of piety. He laughed and pointed to the screen. That guy's definitely from the Serpent Isles. And wow, someone tell him he's ramming it like there's no tomorrow. He flicked to another scene and almost choked. Hold up, what even is that? Is that humanly possible? My guy, you need a license for that thing. Ethan leaned closer to the mic, mock whispering, seriously, buddy? Are you sure it's gonna fit? The Crowleying god lost it. Its eyes burned purple, feathers standing on end as it shrieked like a banshee. Caw, caw, caw. I will annihilate you all. Even Amaterasu and the Serpent Isles. Yeah, good luck smiting them. Ethan shot back. They're a little occupied right now. The god dove toward him in fury, but Aldrich intercepted, his blows hammering against divine plumage. Fire erupted in every direction as the Crowleying god tried to scorch the hologram out of existence. But the screen held firm, being a mere projection. Meanwhile, Aldrich's movements grew sluggish, each strike stiff, like fighting through static. Ethan realized his ridiculous broadcast was messing with both of them. Still, it was working. The Crowleying god had gone feral, forgetting even to heal its wounds. Satisfied, Ethan shut off the projection and tugged out his earplugs. Immediately, a piercing shriek split his skull. Caw, caw, caw. I will annihilate you all. The god had snapped completely, threatening even its own worshippers. Just hot air, Ethan jeered. Your Majesty, finish it off. I'll even bring you back to Earth. You can have every woman from the Serpent Isles you want. He leaned back on one leg, lips curled in a mocking grin, though his stance betrayed a slight tremor. Aldrich struck the Crowleying god in the back, then turned his gaze on Ethan. His eyes burned with something unreadable. Is what you say true? Do not lie to me. Ethan froze. He'd only been joking, hurling taunts without thought. Bringing Aldrich the First back to Earth? The man would start conquering the world by sundown. A third world war wouldn't be far behind. And if Lila found out he'd even entertained the idea, his life wouldn't be worth living. He already had his hands full at home, one more promise like that, and it would be his own personal apocalypse. Still, with Aldrich staring daggers at him, there was only one possible answer. He rubbed his nose, awkward and guilty. No deception. No deception. Aldrich's reply was a single word, deep and chilling. Good. Ethan stiffened. The Emperor had seen through him. That good carried a weight that made his skin crawl. And then Aldrich whispered two more words, soft but terrible. Nether form. Chapter 579. The Return of the Lord of the Underworld. Both Ethan and the Crowleying god froze, equally startled. Aldrich the First's golden imperial aura abruptly contracted, then erupted outward in a torrent of inky black energy. Holy hell! Ethan breathed. The instant that aura appeared, he recognized the sensation. It was the same power that emanated from his mother, the essence of the Lord of the Underworld herself. Caw caw caw. How can you? The Crowleying god recoiled 1,000 miles in a single motion, its enormous body trembling, its eyes flashing with panic. You alone wield the power of faith? Am I forbidden? Do you even know where the Underworld's faith resides? Aldrich's long hair whipped wildly around his head. His body dissolved into a churning mist of black fog until no trace of flesh remained. Only darkness. I know very well, the Crowleying god screeched. What I ask is how you dare control it. Aldrich's laugh rang hollow. I sat upon that throne for over 2,000 years. What do you think? Before the Crowleying god could reply, Aldrich shot across the sky like a black comet, his trail burning against the heavens. The god hesitated, its instinct to flee clashing with its pride. Ethan felt his heart tighten. If it escaped now, the entire battle might be for nothing. But Aldrich was far too fast. The Crowleying god had no choice but to meet him head-on. Purple light erupted from its body, summoning raw energy from the surrounding void. Yet it had hesitated too long. Boom! The convergence was incomplete when Aldrich, cloaked in black radiance, struck with a single devastating punch. The impact shattered the very fabric of the world. The once stable sky cracked like glass, fissures spreading in every direction. The Crowleying god screamed as its colossal form was flung tens of thousands of miles away. Ethan could no longer see it clearly, only a mangled silhouette spinning through the air. For the first time, purple blood scattered in its wake. That blood fell to the earth, spilling into rivers that merged into a violet sea, its surface igniting with ethereal flames. Ethan glanced down at the abyss at his feet, where the throne of the underworld slumbered. Was it truly this powerful? The faith power of the underworld itself. His pulse quickened. Did this mean his mother, despite her strength, had not yet claimed all the underworld's power? Was she buying him time, waiting for him to grow? If so, then in the end she would have to face him. With the throne's blessing, her strength would surge beyond measure. Her enemies would vanish before her. Thud! A dull crash sounded from afar, shaking Ethan from his thoughts. A purple blur hurtled back across the broken horizon, skidding uncontrollably toward him. Aldrich had struck again, pounding the Crowleying god back with another bone-crushing blow. The cracks in this dimension widened, threatening to collapse the entire realm. Cough! Cough! You fool! The Crowleying god rasped, its enormous body crumpling to the ground. Its form was broken, its breath ragged. The strange faith energy that bled into it from the shattered void failed to mend its wounds. Black stains spread across its flesh, Aldrich's underworld power corroding it from within. Its once blazing purple flames flickered weakly. Ethan almost laughed aloud when he saw it. Without the flames, its raw body was exposed, pale, bumpy, like a plucked bird. If he were prone to trypophobia, he might have fainted from disgust. Aldrich hovered above the fallen deity, his voice low and sharp. What do you mean I shouldn't use this power? What's wrong with it? Caw caw caw. I won't tell you. The Crowleying god spat, defiance burning even in its ruin. Humph. Spreading lies to save yourself. Aldrich narrowed his eyes, raising his fist once more. A swirling vortex of darkness gathered in his palm, ready to end the god's existence. But before the blow could land, the world changed. The sky darkened in an instant. The Crowleying god threw its head back and cried with desperate force. Caw caw caw. Lord of the underworld, save me. Aldrich's strike faltered. Ethan's heart lurched. He looked upward, and his breath caught in his throat. The heavens were black, not clouded, but filled with endless ranks of armored soldiers, each clad head to toe in shadowed steel. They stood upright as if hung across the sky. A streak of black light descended, and from it stepped a figure. Ethan's eyes widened, that armor dark and unmistakable. His lips parted, ready to call out. But the woman raised her hand and shook her head. Ethan swallowed the word mom. He understood. Her identity could not be spoken aloud. Still, the joy of seeing her again surged in his chest. Who are you? Aldrich demanded, his aura flaring even higher, stronger than before. The woman did not answer directly. Her presence pressed down like the weight of eternity, commanding worship. She spoke only 2 words, soft and final. Nether form. At once, the entire world dimmed. Darkness fell deeper than the blackest night. Yet paradoxically, the void shimmered with its own strange radiance. Then, without warning, the black faith power surrounding Aldrich began to surge, only to collapse. His strength plummeted. The Crowleying god, broken yet gloating, cackled. Caw, caw, caw. I told you. You should never have touched that power, and you should never have cracked this barrier. Your time is finished. No! Aldrich cried out, his voice raw with despair. Ethan realized the truth. The faith power was not stabilizing within him. It was draining away, pouring from his body like a flood. All of it streamed into the woman before Ethan, his mother, the lord of the underworld. It has been too long, she said, her voice low and calm. The faith power of the underworld. At last, it returns. Now, where is the nether throne? Ethan opened his mouth to tell her it was buried beneath them. But before he could speak, a voice rose from the chasm at his feet, clear and resonant. Lord of the underworld. I am here. Ethan froze in shock. Chapter 580. The Throne of the Underworld King. From the shadows, a black figure shot upward. It was the nether throne, the very relic Aldrich the First had once tried, and failed, to move. The throne ascended smoothly and came to rest behind the Lord of the Underworld. Lord of the Underworld. The throne itself declared, its voice resonating like polished steel. I infused the faith of the underworld into another so that I might return to the nether realm. Please forgive me. Ethan blinked. The throne was speaking. This is not your fault, the Lord of the Underworld replied, her voice calm as she descended and settled upon the throne. To Ethan, the sight felt natural, almost inevitable. Certainly far more fitting than when Aldrich the First had once forced himself into that seat. What I wish to know, she continued, is why you abandoned the underworld and came here. Lord of the Underworld. I am uncertain, the throne answered. When the former lord vanished, I fell into a deep slumber. When I awoke, I was already here. Yet upon me lingered his aura. The words rang like a hymn across the battlefield. I suspected as much, the Lord of the Underworld said coldly. The path of ethereal cannot be opened from the outside without immense faith. Otherwise, I would have reclaimed you long ago. In your absence, 9/10 of the underworld's faith was lost. I could gather only a pitiful fraction, never enough to traverse that path. Were it not for these 2 stirring chaos, shattering the barrier, and allowing me to sense your presence, I could not have come so swiftly. Ethan's mind raced. Even here, his hand was at work. I refuse, Aldrich the First roared. His body shook violently, golden light sputtering against the dark mist. You need not refuse, another voice mocked. The Crowleying god, lying battered on the ground, sneered through its broken beak. You are nothing but a pawn. Pawns do not choose. And are you not the same? The Lord of the Underworld turned her gaze upon the Crowleying god. Her words struck like a hammer, and the creature shrank into the dirt, its arrogance evaporating. Lord of the Underworld, have mercy. You were once the former lord's mount, she said, her tone cutting and precise. When he vanished and I remained unmanifested, you fled, spreading your own cult, sowing chaos, even daring to covet the nether throne itself. Did you hope to claim his title? You put on this grotesque skin and called yourself the Crowleying god. And now you beg for life. Her aura flared, pressing down like the weight of mountains. I was wrong, the creature shrieked. I will shed this skin here and now. Ethan scoffed under his breath. What a cowardly attempt to wriggle free. The beast staggered upright, clawed at its own throat, and ripped. The sound was sickening. Purple blood spattered the ground as the false flesh tore away. A skeletal head pushed through, hollow sockets blazing with green fire. In moments the husk peeled off completely, revealing a massive skeletal dragon. Its wings tattered, its body even larger even than before. The Lord of the Underworld said nothing, only watched in silence. Ethan could not read her expression. Nether Dragon Yarkin, the creature boomed, lowering its skull. Ready to serve, Lord of the Underworld. Freed of its disguise, its aura surged higher, raw and terrifying. Ethan wondered if this was what a true divine rank beast looked like. The Lord of the Underworld gave only a short, dismissive sound. With a wave of her hand, the nether throne lifted from beneath her and settled with a crash onto the dragon's spine. The impact rattled its bones. Yarkin, the throne itself spoke, its voice almost playful. You once sought to steal me. Did you imagine you would ride me? How amusing. I have ridden you for ages. Was this your revenge? The nether dragon froze. The flames in its sockets flickered nervously, betraying its guilt. Bones shifted along its back. Spikes of white grew outward, curving protectively around the throne. Black and white power intertwined, radiating a majesty that could not be denied. This was no longer a throne, but the war seat of the underworld king. Aldrich the First stared at the transformation. His defiance drained away. The black mist around him thinned, and the golden imperial aura beneath it seeped out. His strength dwindled back to what Ethan had first witnessed, the might of a fallen emperor rather than a god. So in the end, Aldrich whispered bitterly, I truly was nothing more than a pawn. You did nothing wrong, the Lord of the Underworld said, her voice softening. Will you not follow me, and together conquer the realms? Ethan fully expected the emperor to accept. But after a long silence, Aldrich shook his head. To conquer is merely to serve as your soldier. I would rather be an ordinary man. He turned to Ethan. And you, boy, you promised to take me back to Earth. That is my ancestral land. I have been away 2,000 years. It is time I returned. His words carried no fire, only weary disillusion. Ethan hesitated. Even weakened, Aldrich was still powerful. Without his mother watching him, who knew what havoc he might unleash? The emperor saw his doubt and gave a weary laugh. Do not worry, boy. You wanted my imperial aura, did you not? Take it. I told you, I will live as an ordinary man. Ethan stiffened. How could Aldrich know of his private conversation with Yaya? Ha ha ha, Aldrich said, reading his face as though it were parchment. I studied kingship since youth. The thoughts of men are written in their eyes. Yours are no exception. Ethan had no reply. His mind whirled, yet no words came. Then Aldrich flicked his hand. Something gleamed as it sailed through the air toward Ethan. His mother tensed, ready to intervene, but sensing no malice, she leaned back into the throne. Ethan caught the object. Opening his palm, he saw several familiar seeds glimmering faintly. His chest tightened. These were the very seeds he had secretly put in the white bottle earlier. He had meant for Aldrich the First to consume them. Chapter 581. The Divine Body Unsealed. Such petty tricks won't work on me, Aldrich the First said with a low chuckle. The haughty imperial title he once used was gone, replaced with something far more grounded. Ethan's mind flared with urgency. Yaya, didn't you say he wouldn't detect your seeds? I'm sorry, brother. Yaya's voice trembled with guilt, almost breaking into tears. It's fine. Don't cry. It's okay. Ethan soothed her quickly, sending what comfort he could to the spirit girl. Before he could say more, Aldrich barked, Kid, catch! His aura erupted like a storm. In the blink of an eye, the vast pressure of his imperial aura condensed into a small, dull, yellowish sphere hovering in the air. The moment it formed, Aldrich's power plummeted. What had once been overwhelming might now flicker down to the strength of an ordinary energy user. With a final flick of his wrist, the sphere flew toward Ethan. Ethan caught it, stunned. The orb was no larger than an egg. Yet in his hand it felt impossibly heavy, as if he were holding a nugget of pure gold. He looked from Aldrich to his mother. The Lord of the Underworld gave him a slight, deliberate nod. Relief washed through him. If Aldrich were hiding treachery, there was no way it could escape her sight. What do I do with it? Ethan asked, gripping the weighty orb. Swallow it, the Lord of the Underworld instructed. Refine it slowly. Aldrich's lips twitched, and a strange glimmer danced in his eyes. Lord of the Underworld, I've thought it over. I won't serve as a mere soldier. Instead, I will walk beside this young man in the living world for a time. When I die, I will enter your service. His sudden shift in tone was too quick, too practiced. Ethan stared at him, bewildered, but the old man only smiled. The Lord of the Underworld regarded him for a long moment. Then she said, As long as you bear no hidden malice, when you come to the Underworld I will grant you dominion over a realm. Your authority will be no less than what you once commanded. Good! Aldrich roared with laughter. In an instant, his aura surged again, blazing with a strength that rivaled his imperial aura. Ethan froze, dumbfounded. This sly old man. He had been holding back all along. Compared to such seasoned cunning, Ethan knew he was still far too green. Is it really wise to bring him back to Earth? He glanced at his mother, searching her expression. She offered no reply. Ethan exhaled heavily. It seemed the decision had already been made for him. I must go now, my son. His mother's voice echoed gently in his ears. The next time we meet may be at the time of the final battle. Ethan opened his mouth, wanting to call out, but stopped himself. You must keep striving, she continued. I never expected you to seize the ancestral dragon's imperial aura. With that, your vessel should now be unsealed. Ethan's heart skipped. Vessel? Unsealed? The words struck him like thunder. You are the ancient vessel, what some call the divine body, she said. When I sent you away, I stripped it from you. The divine body consumes vast energy to advance, far more than a child could ever sustain. Had I left it with you, it would have drained your very life, and you would never have lived past 10 years old. Worse still, once the divine body manifested, certain powers would have marked you. Alone, you could not possibly resist them. Her gaze bore into him, grave and unyielding. When you return to Earth, travel to the far southern lands. You will feel it there. Reclaim what is yours. It lies hidden within a small, sealed space. At her command, the colossal nether dragon stirred. Its skeletal wings, still clinging with scraps of torn membrane, thundered as they spread wide. With the throne of the underworld king upon its back and the lord of the underworld seated upon it, the dragon soared beneath the mass of black-armored soldiers. The fractured sky above began to knit itself back together. You should leave as well, she called out one final time. If you linger, you'll be trapped here. Her army of black-armored warriors shifted into a torrent of shadow, streaming with her into the fading rift. In a single heartbeat, they were gone. Ethan stood in the silence, staring into the void long after it closed. Ancient vessel. Divine body. The words gnawed at him. If he had overheard the quiet conversations between Matriarch Whitmore and Aunt Melinda, he would have realized the truth. They had spoken of the Selim family's divine body bloodline. But that secret had never reached his ears. All Ethan could think of now was his mother, once more slipping away from him just as quickly as she had appeared. The soldiers at her back had worn battle-scarred armor, etched with years of struggle. And his mother, though still towering in power, had carried a weariness in her voice he had never heard before. Since their last meeting, she must have endured countless more battles. The sight stirred something deep within him, a hunger he had not truly felt until this moment. He wanted strength, not just to survive but to stand beside her. Morzin had told him once to keep striving, that 5 years from now the world would need him. Back then, Ethan had brushed it off. He had been content to live a carefree life, to protect only the small circle of people he loved. He had never thought of himself as a savior. But now, watching his mother vanish once again into a battlefield that spanned realms, the desire to grow stronger burned hotter than ever. But how? Could this ethereal world truly shape him into a powerhouse great enough to rival even her? Could it take him further? Aldrich's voice broke through his thoughts. How do we leave this place? The world was settling back into order now that the Lord of the Underworld was gone. The rifts were knitting themselves shut, just as she had warned. Ethan inhaled and raised his voice. Shatterstar, come out. With a sound like mountains collapsing, the 1,000-meter titan appeared, the mech's steel frame blotting out the sky. It had been his final trump card in battle, though he had never had the chance to use it. Now, it would be his only means of returning home. The general's token had vanished from his inventory after its single use. Without it, there was no way to open a new portal back to this world. Without Shatterstar, he might never have found a path to Earth again. The thought chilled him, but only for a moment. He remembered the journey that had brought him here. His descent into the Sea of Death, his passage into the Spirit Realm, his strange encounter with Cage 3106. None of it felt like coincidence. All of it bore the fingerprints of Morzin's designs. More than anything, though, he thought of the quintessence bone. It had come to him in that spirit realm, a relic of unimaginable weight. Morzin had said it was no ordinary treasure, but the legacy of a being beyond compare. He had even told Ethan that its very existence had been waiting for him. And now, within Ethan's body, the quintessence bone pulsed like a living heart, greedily devouring the power of the ancestral dragon's imperial aura. Chapter 582. Return through fire and shadow. This thing devoured the imperial aura as if it had been starved for centuries. The more of the ancestral dragon's imperial aura it absorbed, the brighter the multicolored glow radiating from the bone became. It was almost as though the imperial aura had been created for this very purpose. Even Yaya, wielding the tree of life, couldn't consume the ancestral aura at such a furious pace. Let's go. I'll show you some high-tech, you bumpkin, Ethan muttered, his patience fraying at the old man's endless hidden tricks. Bumpkin? Aldrich the First blinked in disbelief. Yes, Ethan said quickly, reading his confusion. It means you're unbelievably strong and impressive. Oh? Then I am a grand bumpkin. Aldrich roared with laughter. Come. To the Serpent Isles? No, to Earth. His slip betrayed his true thoughts, but he didn't seem to care. As they reached the mech's main hatch, Ethan nearly tripped down the ramp extending from the Shatterstar. He shot a wary glance back at Aldrich. Was this man another Morzin, some shameless deviant? A wave of unease washed over him. With so many beautiful women at his side already, what if this so-called first emperor threw propriety aside entirely? Forget it. Once they arrived in Earth, Ethan decided he would simply abandon him in the Serpent Isles and be done with it. Let him stir up trouble there. If he conquered those local actresses, well, that would almost count as a service to the nation. Having convinced himself, Ethan felt lighter. Inside the Shatterstar, he assigned Aldrich his own quarters, far from the cockpit. The last thing he wanted was the old man beside him during flight. If Aldrich harbored darker intentions, Ethan, locked into the virtual cabin, might not even have the chance to resist. Target location confirmed. Auto-navigate to Earth. Ethan barked, switching into pilot mode. Beep beep. Location confirmed. Target, Earth. Distance exceeds normal range. Spatial jump warp mode required. Proceed. Do it. Get us home. Jump warp mode initializing. Destination locked. Desolate domain. System charging. The mech's voice faded into a low hum as the Shatterstar began to shudder beneath Ethan. He had never felt anything like it. Moments later, the entire machine shimmered, then vanished from the path of ethereal. On the ground below, only a vast crater remained, carved deep into the summit of the general's tomb. Around it, the cracks of warped space slowly stitched themselves closed. The purple fire scars faded, the land restoring itself to its tranquil paradise of birdsong and flowing light. Only the gaping wound at the top of the tomb remained unrepaired. Such was the law of the path of ethereal. It was the most powerful prison in existence, its defenses, inside and out, utterly unyielding. No one who entered could leave. If KH-3106 of the first universe had not run into disaster within the second, he would have come here eventually. And he too would have been trapped. Just as Ethan and the Shatterstar disappeared into the void, a storm of attention erupted across Earth. What drew every gaze was Ethereal's official site. A platform that had never once posted an announcement now blazed with a single headline. Ethereal World reopens tomorrow. System maintenance complete. Henceforth, Ethereal World will remain permanently open, 24/7. The game's reopening was no longer the headline that captured players' attention. What gripped them instead were the last words. Will remain permanently open, 24/7. This was nothing short of a revolution for Ethereal. Overnight, self-proclaimed experts surfaced everywhere, each declaring their theories with conviction. Some warned that with constant access, workshops and farming groups would dominate, smothering the casual experience. Others claimed the gap between professionals and ordinary players would grow so wide it could never be closed. Many cried that the system itself had become unfair, tipping the scales toward those who played for profit. Rumors swirled like wildfire, each more frantic than the last. Ethan, of course, knew nothing of this. Barely half an hour later, Shatterstar's massive frame reappeared in the vastness of space, this time near a blazing red planet. The scorching aura radiating from it stirred something familiar in Ethan's memory. The sun. He breathed, startled by the sight. Desolate domain reached. Distance to target Earth, 150 million kilometers. All thrusters engaged. Estimated arrival, 15 minutes. Initiate stealth mode. Activate. Ethan ordered at once. His voice carried more awe than command. 15 minutes. Unbelievable. Shatterstar's thrusters roared to life. A radiant streak of light tore across the darkness, its speed outstripping comprehension. Compared to this, even the concept of light speed seemed laughable. With stealth mode engaged, however, only Ethan could admire the trail they left behind. What he didn't realize was that the moment the mech had emerged near the sun, another uproar had erupted on Earth. Powerful telescopes across the nations had tracked an unidentified object materializing beside the star. At first, it looked no bigger than a speck of dust compared to the sun's enormity. But when magnified, its shape revealed something distinctly humanoid. The discovery ignited a frenzy among Earth's scientific community. For years they had longed for proof of extraterrestrial life, and now it seemed to be within reach. They rushed to contact reporters, scrambling to organize a global press conference. In truth, most were less concerned with the pursuit of knowledge than with the chance to stand at the center of history and bask in borrowed glory. 15 minutes later, Shatterstar drifted silently into Earth's atmosphere, bypassing every satellite and defense system, as though they were nothing more than children's toys. Compared to Shatterstar, Earth's so-called high technology was little more than decoration. Your Majesty, Ethan said, his tone deceptively casual. We've arrived at your destination. Aldrich I, peering out the viewport, asked warily. Arrived where? Ethan's gaze swept toward the islands below. The Serpent Isles, he said flatly. Go on. And remember to bring glory to the Empire. Before Aldrich could question him further, Ethan pressed a control. In an instant, Aldrich's body dissolved into ions and vanished from the cabin. By the time he regained his senses, he was standing at a bustling intersection. This was Miraito, the busiest crossroads in the world. Streams of people poured past in every direction. At first, no one paid him any mind. But when a few sharp eyes noticed the strange way he had appeared, fingers pointed, voices rose, and a chorus of chatter spread quickly through the crowd. Chapter 583. The Whisper of a Mole. Aldrich I still wore a full suit of armor, his head crowned by a massive horned helmet. The great, curving horns radiated a strange authority, and the sight alone was enough to stop people in their tracks. "Hey man, that's a killer cosplay. Which club are you with?" A man wrapped in a headcloth stepped closer, his outfit resembling the robes of an Indian mystic. Aldrich stared blankly, unmoved by the stranger's rapid English. When the man noticed the confusion, he tried again in simpler words. "Club?" Aldrich repeated, his voice muffled through the helm. The modern word meant nothing to him, and he only looked more puzzled. Watching from above, Ethan laughed quietly. He nudged the Shatterstar's controls, guiding the massive mech away and leaving Aldrich to bewilder the crowd as he pleased. Despite the vast gulf between the sun and Earth, Shatterstar covered it in a mere 15 minutes. Once it entered Earth's skies, the mech reduced its thrust to avoid detection. Yet even restrained, its speed was staggering. In moments, it had crossed into the U.S. territory. Then Ethan remembered. Celeste. She had left him an urgent message before. How long had it been now? A twinge of worry slipped into his chest. He pulled up the tactical map and redirected his course. Rerouting. New target. Ravenwood. The mech, which had been cutting north toward the Ashhorn Mountains, halted sharply in midair before pivoting south. Within minutes, it was soaring over Ravenwood. Ethan felt a rush of exhilaration. Flying Shatterstar was like stepping through portals across the world, a kind of freedom he had never known. To go anywhere at will, it was intoxicating. Following the remembered route, he guided the machine in a low sweep over the land. Soon, a thick shroud of mist rolled into view. He had found it. Hidden within that fog was the secret of Shadow Link's village. At the mist's edge, Ethan brought the mech down into the ancient forest. This time he didn't recall it to the hangar. Instead, he left it hovering just above the fog, ready to respond at his call. Even with his power far greater than before, he wasn't foolish enough to be reckless. No one knew what still lingered in this land that was whispered to be humanity's cradle within the desolate domain. Aldrich I had walked out of 2,000 years of death. If that was possible, then what else might dwell here? Drawing on memory, Ethan retraced the sequence Doe had once used to lead them through. He twisted and turned, navigating the dense, disorienting white. After half an hour, he stepped past the final marker. The fog dissolved, and the village revealed itself. The familiar sights came rushing back. The desolate huts, the withered well at the entrance, the rust-eaten drilling rig, and even the backpacks and ropes they had left behind. When he turned, the wall of mist loomed close again, still sealing the way. The old array had not weakened in all this time. It continued to funnel outsiders harmlessly back to where they began, shielding the village from intrusion. By now dusk had fallen. The jungle's darkness mixed with the fog, sinking the world into a murky twilight. Ethan had been here before, yet a cold tremor ran down his spine. His eyes caught something that made the hair on his arms rise. From one of the village chimneys, smoke was curling upward. Immediately, he expanded his soul sense. At that same moment, a woman emerged from between the huts, a basket on her arm. Her eyes found him at once. A pulse of soul power brushed against his own. "Celeste," he sent through the link, shock in his voice. "Ethan," came the answering thought. In the blink of an eye, Ethan was moving, racing toward her with all the speed he could muster. When Ethan finally saw Celeste, her appearance jolted him. Her face was thinner than he remembered, worn with hardship, but it was the left side that froze him in place. "Celeste, what happened to you?" She instinctively touched her scarred cheek. "Ugly, isn't it?" she said lightly. The burn stretched across her skin in harsh, twisted ridges. Ethan's eyes narrowed, fury flashing in them. Who did this? Was it the dissenters? But Celeste only shook her head and forced a smile. "You got my message, but you took your time. If you hadn't shown up today, I'd probably have left tomorrow." She spoke as though it was nothing, sidestepping the question. "Sorry, I got delayed," Ethan said, awkward in his own defense. "It doesn't matter. You're here now." Her familiar spark returned, unbroken even by the scar. She stepped aside, holding the door open. "Come in. I just finished cooking." Ethan followed her inside. The house was small, humble, yet swept clean. It looked as though Celeste had lived there for some time. Once the door shut, her voice dropped. Why didn't the others come with you? I didn't tell them. She arched her brows. What about Leo? The question hit Ethan like a stone. He hesitated. Leo's been missing. 9 days now. His voice trailed as he thought back. In ethereal, before entering the general's hall, he had still been able to hear outside the VR capsule. He remembered the words Victor had spoken then. What? Celeste's chair scraped as she stood, her expression alarmed. Her reaction made Ethan's stomach sink. Could Leo have somehow reached the Shadow Lynx village? Had he seen the 8 blade marks too? If so, and he hadn't returned in all this time, but Celeste's next words broke his train of thought. No, this is worse. He must have gone to Ember City. We can't stay here, we have to leave immediately. She was already moving for the door. Celeste, slow down. What's in Ember City? Ethan asked quickly, realizing his guess had been wrong. She turned, conflicted. I sent you 2 messages. One was this location. The other. Ethan pressed. There's a mole among you. Her voice was heavy, reluctant, as though the words themselves weighed her down. The room seemed to tilt. Ethan's mind roared. A mole? Faces flickered through his memory. Friends, allies, comrades. Who? Far away, in the Whitmore family's hidden territory, silence gripped the chamber. All eyes were on Leo. He had just awakened, but his body was weak and pale. Curiosity burned in him even through the exhaustion. He touched his chest, searching for the familiar thump of his heart. Yet there was none. Alive but not alive. The realization made his blood run cold. Then he looked up, startled, and his voice cracked through the silence. Where's Ethan? Leo's gaze locked on Victor. Chapter 584. The Betrayer's Confession. Victor noticed Leo staring at him, unblinking, then saw his eyes shift slowly toward Lila. Ethan disappeared from the VR capsule again, Lila said, recounting what she had just witnessed. As she spoke, Leo's pupils had narrowed into vertical slits, and his gaze stayed fixed on Victor. The weight of it made Victor's chest tighten. Boss isn't here, Leo said suddenly, his voice rough. Are you going to tell them yourself? Or should I? Victor blinked, thrown off. What? Not you, Victor. Step aside, Leo said flatly. I wasn't talking about you. Only then did everyone realize Leo's attention wasn't on Victor at all, but on the man standing just behind him, Williams. A ripple of understanding passed through the group. None of them were fools. They remembered what Starfall had described earlier. When Leo had been half dead, he'd carved words of warning into the ground with shaking hands. At the time, Starfall had even drawn the words for them, and everyone had assumed it was meant to be a warning for Ethan. But now, with Leo alive and pointing straight at Williams, the meaning shifted. He was talking about Williams? The sentence hadn't made sense until now. You already know, then, Williams said quietly. His face was gray, but there was something almost relieved in his tone. I have nothing more to hide. For a woman, you betrayed the boss? Leo growled, stepping forward and grabbing Williams by the collar. Was it worth it? Williams's composure broke. He roared back, eyes blazing. What would you do if it were Celeste? His head snapped toward Victor. And you? What would you do if it were Celia? The names landed like blows. Both men stiffened, the question cutting deeper than they wanted to admit. Victor stepped forward quickly, prying Leo's hand off Williams's collar before the situation could spiral. Leo, tell us what happened. Now. Leo let go, stumbling back a few steps. His legs gave way and he sank onto a bench, shaking from head to toe. Before Williams came here with us, his so-called ex-wife was being controlled. They threatened him, forced him to stay close, to dig for Ethan's weaknesses and report back. That day when Liam barged in and had his arm severed by a ghost parasite, you all saw it. What you didn't see was another parasite coming straight to me. It carried a message. From the captain. Leo's voice cracked, then steadied. I don't know why it didn't go to the boss directly. Maybe he suspected a mole already. But the message was clear. Williams had been turned, and the boss needed to watch his back. Leo paused, his eyes burning with shame. I didn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. Williams was a brother I'd fought beside for years. I thought it had to be a mistake, so I kept it from Ethan. I went back to Ember City to investigate on my own. And just like the captain warned, I was found out. Attacked. Nearly killed. After that, well, you all know the rest better than I do. He lifted his ruined arm, the flesh twisted beyond recognition. But here's the thing. Williams may have agreed to their terms, but I discovered something. He hasn't given them anything. Not yet. His voice dropped to a sneer. Isn't that right, Williams? Williams's face crumpled. Leo, I'm sorry, he said hoarsely, shame etched across his features. Leo exhaled through his nose in disgust. Humph. You lucky bastard. Starfall cut in, shaking his head. And here you are, still complaining. Leo turned, startled, staring at him. For the first time, he realized he had no idea how he'd survived at all. No idea that it had been Starfall who had saved him. All right, everyone, don't blame him. As a woman, I'm on Williams's side. Lila stepped forward, placing herself between the men. She gave Williams a small, sympathetic smile. I agree, Celia said, moving to stand beside Lila. Williams never passed on any real information, and now we know the truth. What matters now is saving his wife. Her final words were aimed at her husband, Victor. The two women weren't excusing Williams's betrayal. They were softening the blow. They understood too well the desperate choices a person could be forced into. Lila, Celia, I. Williams's voice trembled. At first he looked stunned by their support, even grateful. But then his expression collapsed into despair. I sent a message. In ethereal. What? The entire hall erupted in shock. What did you say? Lila demanded, her face paling. That day. The boss was drunk, talking about his high school days. Williams stammered. You leaked information about Rainy-chan? Lila's voice dropped, her expression hardening. She remembered the night Ethan had been drinking and mentioned, almost laughing, his clumsy love letters from school. She had brushed it off at the time. Everyone had a first love. It hadn't mattered. But hearing Williams now, her stomach clenched. Idiot. Rainy-chan has nothing to do with Ethan anymore. You've dragged an innocent woman into this. Lila's fury spilled out, sharper than anyone had ever heard from her. Williams froze, his lips trembling but no words coming. His face had gone ash-gray. Lila glared at him one last time, then spun on her heel and strode toward the entrance of the ancestral hall. Lila, where are you going? Celia demanded, shooting Williams a cutting look before hurrying after her. Outside, the other women, Dragonchild, Astrid, Nora Vance, and the others bound to Ethan were already gathering. Dragonchild darted after Lila. Worry etched across her face. Lila stopped in front of them, her expression tight. Looking at the 9 women, she gave a bitter smile. She knew Ethan's feelings. He wasn't romantically entangled with them, but she understood the longing in their eyes all too well. I need to make a call, she said. Right now we only have a name, but the enemy has probably already dug up her entire background. We don't have much time. It might already be too late. Ravenwood, Shadow Lynx Village. Ethan suddenly shot to his feet, his gut tightening. If Leo was exposed, then the dissenters. His eyes went wide. Celeste Hawthorne's expression shifted, but her voice was calm. The dissenters? Forget it. Too much time has passed. If you go now, it's already too late. Leo isn't meant to die so easily. Right now, there's something more important you need to hear, the real reason I brought you here. But Ethan barely heard her words. She saw the storm in his eyes and pressed on. We can talk on the way. All right. Ethan nodded reluctantly. The promised meal was forgotten. There was no time for it now. The two of them stepped outside together. But before they could take more than a few steps, a chilling voice echoed across the village, curling around them from every direction. Since you're here, why the rush to leave? The boy you're so worried about is already dead. Chapter 585. The false captain revealed. The sudden voice made Celeste's face tighten in alarm. Ethan immediately spread his soul sense, but found nothing. No figures, no suspicious presences. Director Vaughn. What brings you here? Celeste quickly regained her composure, her tone respectful and deferential. Celeste, it's been far too long. I've been searching for you endlessly, and never expected you to be hiding here. Clever, very clever. The most dangerous place is always the safest. Such a simple truth, and yet it never crossed my mind. The voice came again from every direction, carrying with it a strange fluctuation of soul power that stirred something faintly familiar in Ethan's mind. From Celeste's words, he understood that this unseen speaker was none other than the leader of the 9th Division, the head of the Originalists himself. The Candle Abyss isn't fully formed yet. This is where it's still gestating, Celeste said evenly, her expression unchanged. Is that so? I was beginning to think you had defected. The voice cut in sharply. At those words, Ethan felt a surge of indignation. Celeste had risked everything, enduring years of torment and deception to infiltrate the dissenters for the sake of the Originalists. Yet this old man still doubted her loyalty. His hands clenched, but he held his tongue. Director Vaughn, what exactly do you mean by that? Celeste demanded, her voice tightening with anger. Exactly what I said. And why, pray tell, did you bring this boy here? Celeste's face shifted slightly at that question, though she offered no reply. Ethan noticed the tension in her shoulders and suddenly felt the unease mounting inside him. "Ethan, find a chance to escape," she said urgently. Before Ethan could react, the air shimmered and a dozen figures appeared out of thin air, surrounding them. "Escape? Not a chance," one of them roared. Ethan's heart jolted. Within the scope of his soul sense, he hadn't sensed even the faintest trace of these men before. A mocking chuckle rolled through the air. "Heh. Young one, you may be a soul wielder, but you're still far too green." Ethan turned toward Celeste, his brows knitting. She stood frozen, eyes locked on the figures, tears glistening as they gathered in her eyes. "Captain," she whispered, her voice trembling with a grief Ethan had never heard from her before. He blinked in confusion, stunned. Captain? Could these people be her old squad? But hadn't she told him that they'd all perished, that she alone had survived? Celeste drew a shaky breath and steadied herself. "He knows nothing. Let him leave," she said, her tone calm now, though her body braced for the inevitable fight. Ethan stepped forward, his voice hard and cold. "What kind of squad abandons a teammate and flees alone? Don't insult me with that." "Humph, I found you. Now show yourself." He glared at a point in the empty air. From between his brows a flash of white light shot forth. Boom! A low, heavy thud echoed. The space wavered, rippling like disturbed water. A nearby civilian house blurred and shimmered before the illusion peeled away. Standing before it was an old man with a hunched back, his hair and beard white as snow, his body wrapped in a tattered gray cloak. The cloak had been blasted open, revealing his startled eyes. Ethan could see the traces of force left by his own soul power. "You are Director Vaughn?" Ethan demanded, his gaze sharp as lightning, locking onto the elder. "To think you could break my soul illusion. Then I cannot allow you to live. Kill him, and bring Celeste back for re-education." The old man's eyes narrowed, a cold glint flashing as he gave the order to the dozen energy users surrounding them. "Run!" Celeste shouted, shoving Ethan away with all her strength. Boom! To everyone's surprise, there was a dull impact. Ethan hadn't moved at all. Instead, Celeste staggered back a step, her own force turned against her. If she hadn't held back, she might have injured herself. Ethan caught her quickly, steadying her. He met her wide, disbelieving eyes and grinned. "Celeste, do you still think I'm that useless kid?" "You!" Celeste was stunned beyond words. "We'll talk later," Ethan said lightly. His gaze swept over the gathered enemies, lingering on the hunched old man who called himself Director Vaughn. These people, should they live or should they die? Celeste froze. The old man, the so-called paragon of the 9th Division, was nothing like the stories she'd once believed. She remembered praising him, even admiring him. But now, Ethan saw the truth in her expression. Vaughn wasn't some revered leader. He was a manipulator, ready to erase her memories, to twist her mind again. If that was the case, had her past itself been the product of his re-education? "Destroy what's in their minds," Celeste said coldly, her eyes hardening as she leapt into battle. She knew Ethan wouldn't leave, and that his strength already outstripped her own. Together, maybe they had a chance. "All right," Ethan muttered, his voice low. Then he roared, "Explode!" Clap, 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 clap. Celeste froze mid-strike. In the space of a heartbeat, the dozen enemies before her convulsed. Their heads ruptured all at once, and from each skull something like a translucent jellyfish tore upward, only to burst apart in the air with a wet pop, dissolving into liquid that rained back down. "Sorry, I might have overdone it," Ethan said, scratching his head when he saw her stunned face. Celeste turned toward him, frowning. For a moment she looked as though she didn't recognize him. "Never mind," she said finally, shaking her head. "They were already dead men. I just hoped to leave their bodies intact. What a waste." Her gaze flicked to the headless corpses and she sighed. But Ethan wasn't done. "Where do you think you're going?" he growled, hurling himself forward at Vaughn. The old man, calm and composed until now, suddenly looked stricken with fear. He hadn't expected Ethan's strength to be so overwhelming. Regret flared in his eyes. Regret for not killing this boy the moment he'd discovered him. His arrogance had led him here to this very moment. Ethan cut off his escape and swung his fist, the force so immense it rippled through the air. Boom! A massive earthen wall surged up between them, solid and thick. Ethan's strike collided against it with a thunderous impact, shattering the barrier to rubble. The instant the wall broke, Ethan's fist curved into a claw, his hand shooting forward to seize Vaughn by the throat. He yanked the old man out of hiding, lifting him effortlessly into the air, his elbow locked firm. "You're also an earth elemental wielder," Ethan said in surprise, gripping tightly. He hadn't expected Vaughn to command both soul power and elemental energy. On Earth, such a combination made him a formidable opponent. Against anyone else, Vaughn might have been untouchable. But today he had the misfortune of facing Ethan. If Ethan hadn't arrived, Celeste would have been taken tomorrow, as she herself had warned. She would have been at Vaughn's mercy. "Heh! You wouldn't dare kill me?" Vaughn rasped, though his voice was strained in Ethan's iron grip. For a moment he looked defiant again, forcing composure back into his expression. Chapter 586. The Ghost Infant Parasites. Ethan's eyes narrowed at the old man's words. "I wouldn't dare?" His grip tightened around the man's throat. The old man coughed violently, gasping out, "Do you remember a woman named Rainy-chan?" Ethan froze at the name. His expression hardened, darkening in an instant. "What does she have to do with this?" A twisted smile crept across the old man's lips. "I had no choice. You moved everyone into the hidden territory, so she was the only one left I could reach. Otherwise, how could I possibly control someone as dangerous as you?" He had guessed correctly. Ethan's grip slackened. "Control me? The way you controlled Celeste." Ethan's voice was low, grim. "What are you after? It can't be as simple as keeping me on a leash." He lowered the old man slightly but didn't release him. "That's none of your concern," Director Vaughn said, arrogance returning with the air in his lungs. "Open your mindscape. Let me plant a seed in you, and I'll release the woman." Ethan gave a short, incredulous laugh. "Are you out of your mind? You?" Vaughn's face twisted as he prepared to threaten him again. But Ethan didn't let him finish. His hand shot upward, glowing with soul power, reaching for Vaughn's face. Soul technique. Soul scourge. Celeste, standing nearby, understood instantly what was about to happen. Vaughn had overplayed his hand. Ethan's temper was iron, unyielding, stubborn, impossible to bend. The moment Vaughn tried to use Rainy-chan against him, his fate was sealed. "You wouldn't dare!" Vaughn shouted, desperation breaking through his composure. Panic replaced calculation. Ghost parasites emerge. At first he had tried bluffing, but the surge of soul power pouring from Ethan's brow left him no choice. With a furious roar, Vaughn unleashed his trump card. The air buzzed, thick with malice. From his body spilled a swarm of writhing shadows. Ghost parasites, their forms black and twisted, each one dripping with hatred and resentment. They rushed at Ethan in a cloud of living nightmare. Celeste's eyes widened. "A curse caster!" Her voice trembled with shock. She had thought she knew everything about Director Vaughn. After regaining her memories, she had investigated thoroughly, uncovering his past as both a soul wielder and an earth elemental controller. That research had led her to Shadow Link's village, to Ethan, to the secret she had believed Vaughn was guarding. But never, not once, had she imagined he was also a curse caster. Ethan, meanwhile, had never encountered such abominations before. The sight of them was enough to make him instinctively retreat, unwilling to let the swarm touch him. But then his eyes sharpened. Among the writhing cloud, three stood out. Three parasites that didn't quite match the others. One in particular glimmered faintly, as if marked by some darker power. Its body was split by a pale line running straight down the middle, like it had been severed and crudely stitched back together. Recognition struck Ethan like a blade. "It's you. The one who attacked us at the bathhouse. That was you." The memory slammed into him. He and Markham had followed a guy into that club, only to find the place smothered in ghostly energy. Markham had taken one look and backed out, muttering, "Can't handle it. Retreat." But Ethan had stayed. Using his soul sense, he had seen the club for what it truly was. A gaping maw in his mindscape, filled with writhing spirits. That was when it had struck. An ambush of soul power, a parasite tearing through the fabric of his mind. It had been back then, during the attack, that Ethan had first manifested the Twilight Warspear. The weapon had cleaved the ancient parasite in two, its light tearing through the abomination. But the price had been steep, draining almost all of his soul power, leaving him collapsed and barely breathing. Markham had carried him back that day. Now the same parasite had returned. "You know too much," Director Vaughn's voice rasped. Gone was the hollow, serene tone of a master. His voice now rattled like death itself. Ghost infant soul gathering. Ethan felt it before he saw it. The three strange parasites shifting, twisting, deforming. Wah! 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 The cries of infants echoed through the air, piercing and unbearable. The three anomalies warped into ghastly infant heads, each glowing with an unnatural light. One dark as pitch, another earthy yellow, the last a watery blue. The aura rolling off them was foul, yet eerily potent. Ethan's breath caught when he sensed the last one. The watery blue parasite carried a faint, familiar scent. His eyes went cold. You went to Ember City. How are you connected to Henry Joe? The Den. Jade Taylor. You killed her. He spoke each word slowly, like a blade grinding against stone. Vaughn's laughter split the air. Ha ha ha. Henry Joe? He was my pawn. I had him wreck your shop, provoke you, set you against that red-haired fool. I thought that silly little love letter you wrote in high school was for her, but it turned out to be for someone else. His face twisted with mad delight. That girl was pregnant anyway. She had no use left. But then I discovered. She and the infant in her womb both bore charts perfectly aligned with the water element. Such a rare, perfect condition. How could I waste it? And so, I refined them into this. My ghost infant parasite. He raised a hand toward the 3 floating heads, their infant cries rising. What a pity. I'm still missing 2 elements for the full set. But even so, his voice dropped, trembling with zeal. Even with your soul power, Ethan, you're nothing but food for my children. Good children, devour him. The weak soul wielders I fed you before were scraps. Feast on this one and become unstoppable. The man's arrogance poured out unchecked. His plan was plain. To capture Ethan alive, to use him like livestock, endlessly generating soul power to fatten the parasites. Ethan's rage ignited. His teeth clenched, every muscle taut. This was the one behind it all, the schemes, the ambushes, the blood spilled in his path. All to make him feed these wretched monsters. You damned old scoundrel, Ethan snarled. Playing with dolls and thinking you're the only one who knows how. His brow pulsed with light. Yaya, Luna, Beastie, swish, swish, swish. 3 beams of white light shot from his mindscape and took form before him. 2 were girls. One, small, clutched a silver spear almost as big as she was. The other, older, no more than 14 or 15, held a willow branch glowing faintly. Between them stood a sturdy boy, broad-shouldered despite his youthful face, gripping a heavy seal. Oh. 3 against 3. We can fight. The boy Beastie cheered, his voice booming. The seal in his hands whirled into the air and floated above his head. Slap. Ow! Luna, what was that for? Beastie clutched his skull. The younger girl, Luna, had swatted him without hesitation. Hands on her hips, she glared. Are you stupid? 3 against 3 is boring. Master, hurry up and call out Aqua, Gale, and Oblivion too. Luna likes outnumbering the enemy. Ethan blinked at her demand, thrown off balance by her bluntness even as the battlefield darkened around them. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.